Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody, to this first full council meeting of this year. So I have to remind everybody that the meeting is hybrid and we have a number of participants joining the meeting remotely. Also, that the meeting is being streamed live and stored for later viewing. I can suspend the webcast if I consider that it will affect the proceedings. A recording of the meeting will also be published on the Council's YouTube channel. Also, can I remind everybody to switch on the microphone to speak and then switch off when you finish speaking, and I'll try and remember to do that as well. And if we can look and help each other to do that, that would be great. Thank you very much. So, colleagues, we have a very full agenda for us to deliberate today. As it's the budget meeting, I'll be seeking formal consent later for movers of motions and amendments to exceed the time limits on budget items. It will be a lengthy meeting and I plan to stop around 12 noon for lunch. The intention is to start after lunch with item 13, that's the strategic impact of the financial settlement. And depending on how near we are to 12 noon, when we reach item 13, I may use my discretion to bring forward item 15, which is financial planning, and possibly item 21, that's the scheme of remuneration, and it's just to bring us up to lunchtime and get those items dealt with. We might have other short breaks if required. So, colleagues, our council has an excellent reputation in many ways, and in the main, elected members have articulated their views on issues, and I would want our debates to be exemplary. It's my experience that generally people come into politics to make a change for the better, and although we might have different views about how to do that, I believe that we have more in common than what divides us. We all want the best for the communities that we represent. Before we start the business of today's meeting, I'd like to say a public thank you and to commend the long and invaluable service of our Democratic Services Manager, Eamon Daly, who is attending his last meeting of the full council today ahead of his retirement. There will be an opportunity to say more at the end of the meeting. Sorry about that, Eamon. I didn't see that one coming. So, moving on to the agenda now. Are there any apologies for absence? No apologies for absence. Item 2. The Councillors' Code of Conduct requires elected members to declare any connection they may have in any of the items on the agenda. Are there any declarations of interest? There are none. Item 3. Minute of the meeting of the 14th of December. The minute is submitted for approval. Is this a point of order?
It's a comment on, well, it's a question on there's something missing.
Well, there are no questions, and the Democratic Services Officer emailed out to everybody, these minutes are not verbatim, so there are no questions allowed on this.
Then it's a point of order.
A point of order. Okay, on you go.
Thank you very much. It is a point of order, and I just want to clarify something before the meeting moves on. There is no mention in this minute that I was stopped from talking at the last full council meeting and prevented from doing so. I would like an assurance.
Sorry, that's not a point of order, Councillor Ireland, and I'm moving on now. Agreed. Thank you very much. Moving on now to the minute volume. Item 4 is the minute of the special meeting, and again, the minutes is not verbatim. Are we agreed the minute?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. Now, the minute volume. I'm going to go down this in threes. And so I'll go down the first three. We've dealt with the council meeting, special council meeting. So audit and scrutiny. Agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Next three, Cabinet, Planning Applications and Education Committee. Agreed?
Agreed.
Special Audit and Scrutiny Committee, Cabinet, Police and Fire Licensing Committee. Agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Planning Applications Committee, Local Review Body, Cabinet. Agreed?
Agreed.
And I will add the Audit and Scrutiny of the 23rd of February to that list. Agreed. Thank you very much, colleagues. That's very helpful. So, now, moving on to item 6. No. Item 6. Items remitted to the Council. So, 6.1, East Renfrewshire Local Policing Plan 2023-26. So this has been remitted to the Council, and in terms of the scheme of administration, the plan needs to be approved by the full Council. The Cabinet did consider the plan, but remitted it to the Council without any recommendations. So we have here in attendance, and thank you for your attendance today, Chief Superintendent Sutherland and Chief Inspector Galley, who will be present at the meeting to respond to any questions. So we're looking for the Council to approve the plan, but are there any comments or questions on this? Councillor O'Donnell.
I welcome this report. I think there's a lot of joined-up thinking in terms of where the Council is and their thinking about protecting our residents, and I welcome this plan. I also note that COSLA have got a similar agreement with Police Scotland, and in particular the approach towards public health, which is very welcome. I know Glasgow have been pioneering this approach, and Police Scotland will be reflecting that and catching up a little bit in terms of nationally. But that was discussed at COSLA last week, and it's very welcome development. So it's more of a comment really than a question.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Campbell.
I would just really like to echo what Councillor O'Donnell has said. It's a superb report, and also really to thank the police for all they do in the community. And, you know, they come to community council meetings, etc., and just your involvement. I really would like to commend you for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. I'm sure we would all agree with those sentiments. Councillor Buchanan, sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. Again, just to really echo the comments and welcome the report. It is a comprehensive report, and I think stands the test of time that we have always had a very good relationship with our colleagues and our partners across East Renfrewshire. So very much happy to welcome the report and continue on that basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buchanan. Anybody else? I would like to invite police representatives who would like to say anything or say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having us, and thank you for the kind comments right across the board. We remain absolutely committed to that partnership approach and collaboration that has lasted the test of time and has been alluded to across East Renfrewshire. We were delighted by the level of feedback that came through the consultation ahead of this new local policing plan. And as Councillor O'Donnell alluded to, I'm delighted that we have public health through a policing lens as a golden thread through this plan, and having that in the plan will bring us and hold us to account on how we deliver that over the next 3 years. And again, I thank Graham for his work locally that he does in terms of supporting the communities across East Renfrewshire, and look forward to the next 3 years working with everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Provost. I'd just like to echo the words of the Commander, and we look forward to the next 3 years, which will hopefully be as successful as the last. Thank you.
Thank you very much to you both for that too, and feel free to leave at any time. You might want to follow the proceedings, but know that you have other work to do as well, so please feel free to leave when convenient to you. And also to echo what the positive comments that have been made, and to commend the blue light services who all run towards and deal with issues that the rest of us would do run away from. So thank you very much. Sorry, haven't switched myself back on again. I'll say it again. We agree the plan. Agreed. Thank you very much. Now, item 6.2, this is the addition to charging for services, and it was the outcome of call-in decisions. So this was remitted from the Cabinet with the recommendations as set out in your papers. So can we agree the recommendations? Are they agreed? Agreed? Agreed. Okay, very good. Thank you. On to item 6.3. This is the Treasury Management Strategy Report, and I will invite Councillor Morrison to comment on this. Thank you, Councillor Morrison.
Thank you very much, Provost. In accordance with the SIPFA Treasury Management Code of Practice, the Audit and Scrutiny Committee is responsible for ensuring effective scrutiny of the Treasury Management Strategy, including the approved list of investors and the policy on the repayment of loans fund advances. The strategy for 23-24 was considered by the Audit and Scrutiny Committee on the 23rd of January. It is in the same format as in previous years, setting out the parameters within which the Treasury function operates, the list of approved organisations for investments, and the policy for loans fund advances. This year, the strategy also includes a policy on environmental, social and governance factors which are considered when the Council makes investments, and a new prudential indicator, the liability benchmark, that shows the amount of outstanding loan debt that the Council needs to fund its existing debt liabilities. The committee noted that they would also receive progress reports at mid-year and at year-end in due course. As recommended by the Audit and Scrutiny Committee, we now remit this to full Council and ask members to approve paragraphs A to D as set out in the papers today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Morrison. Are there any questions or comments on this? I see none. Okay, so can we agree the recommendations from the Audit and Scrutiny, that's at A, B and C, are set out in the agenda as outlined by Councillor Morrison? Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Item 7, statements by conveners or representatives of joint boards or committees, and understand we have a short statement from Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Provost. Just a quick statement with regards to yesterday. The Scottish Government published the summary statistics for attainment and initial leaver destinations, and in East Renfrewshire, of the 1,430 young people who left East Renfrewshire schools during the academic year 21-22, I am very pleased to report that 1,408 were in higher education, further education, employment or training, when the national snapshot was taken in October 2022. As a result of this, 98.5% of our school leavers were in a positive destination, our highest proportion since figures were published. For comparison, at the same point last year, 97.4% of East Renfrewshire school leavers were in a positive destination. The proportion of leavers in a positive destination in East Renfrewshire was well above the national average, which is 95.7%. Of our 1,430 school leavers, 69.8% went to higher education, 12.4% to further education, 14.3% to employment, and 1.2% to training. The proportion in higher education was the highest of all local authorities and well above the national average of 41.2%. In all of our schools, almost all school leavers achieved a positive destination. One school, Barrhead High School, achieved a 100% success rate, and in St Luke's High School the success rate was 99.2%, which is absolutely fantastic. It is notable that despite serving communities that experience higher levels of poverty, proactive partnership working has led to these significant achievements. St Ninian's High School also had more than 99% of school leavers in a positive destination. As you can imagine, I am delighted with these figures, which reflect very well on our young people and the support they have received from school staff working in partnership with Skills Development Scotland colleagues and our education departments developing the young workforce team. However, we continue to strive for sustained positive school leaver destinations for all young people. Therefore, we are continuing to work with a range of partners, including Skills Development Scotland, HSCP, and Work East Ren, to support the 22 people who, at the time of the data collection, were not in a sustained destination. We will look forward to the follow-up report based on a snapshot taken in April and then being published in June. I am sure the Council will join me in passing on our congratulations and thanks to all the school staff and the partners that were involved. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Convener. Are there any questions or points, Councillor Buchanan?
Thanks, Provost. Yeah, just to echo some of the comments made, the figures are absolutely outstanding.
Sorry, Councillor Buchanan, I've been too generous. You're not allowed questions or comments on that, but I'm sure you will all join in commending the success rate and all the people involved, the partners, pupils, parents and staff. Thanks very much. Okay, so on to the next item, number 8, is Provost engagement for noting. Agreed? Thank you. Item 9. Appointment to East Renfrewshire Culture and Leisure Trust Board, and so this appointment needs to be approved by the Council in accordance with the Trust Articles of Association and the Board Charter. Is that agreed? Okay, and welcome the new member to the Trust Board, and good luck for all your future endeavours. Item 10 is the East Renfrewshire Culture and Leisure Trust Business Plan 2023-24. The report is seeking approval of the business plan, and of course this approval will be subject to the confirmation of the budget. If there are any questions and comments, Anthony McCreevy is online, so he can answer any questions or comments. Councillor Ireland.
Thank you very much, Provost. That's great that Anthony McCreevy is here today. I've got 2 questions for Anthony. On page 141 under operational plans, I feel that this information is...
Sorry, Councillor Ireland, could you give people a chance to get to that part of the papers? So what page did you say it was?
Page 141.
Page 141, if you just give us a second to get there, please.
And it's under operational plans.
Okay, Councillor Ireland, on you go.
Thank you very much, Provost. The information on this and under this is vague. There's no information given at all as to what the withdrawal of services and suspension and cessation of some programmes are. Can you please give some additional information as to what these are and the expected timescales to this information becoming public? I think that's quite important. The reason I'm asking is I'm extremely worried that the current administration are looking at closing some community halls or libraries, and I would like to know if those conversations are being had, and, as I said, on what timeline. What current proposals are being considered as part of ERC's wider public consultation process, because, as the paper states, this will help inform the final outcome of the actions to be taken. That was my first question. My second question was, I noticed in the previous 2 cabinet papers there was one on Eastwood Changing Village that came up on the 23rd of February, and then there's an upcoming, sorry, apologies, not the last 2, one on the 23rd, and then there's one on the 2nd of March going to cabinet. Both of these highlight that construction costs are rising faster than general inflation due to shortages of material and labour, and bidders are factoring in additional risk in their prices, and they're looking at it could be 20 to 50% on some projects, and that's the same, that 20 to 50% is quoted again on the paper going to cabinet. My question on this is, given at the previous meeting of the full council on the 14th of December, the decision was taken to put in a 2-year delay to the leisure centre, and that was going to cost us £7 million. Has that figure remained at £7 million, or is there a possibility this might increase? That was my 2. Thank you.
You've involved a number of issues in that, Councillor Ireland, so I'm just trying to identify the best people to respond. So Eamon's advising.
Anthony can take the first part.
Okay, Anthony can take the first part, and then did you say Phil Dawes or Councillor O'Donnell? Okay, then Phil.
Yes. No, is he not?
No, it's after.
Okay, are you
So
okay?
hopefully I can handle that with Katrina between us.
Okay, again, it's helpful if such complex questions could be maybe intimated in advance so that people have got, and you know, they can give you a full answer, and that's what the point of your question is, I'm sure. So, over to Anthony. First of all, thank you.
Thank you, Provost. This business plan doesn't propose any closures or cessation of services. What we've said in the business plan is that we will have to consider those, and they will be included in the next business plan. The reason for that is we're anticipating making a loss of £1.7 million over the course of the forthcoming financial year, but we have made provision for that, both in terms of temporary funding that is available to the council for COVID-related losses, and within our own reserves. We've also had a better than projected commercial performance in terms of our earned income. And so before we started to look at closure and cessation of services, we wanted to see where we land this year, because obviously our earned income rolls forward into next year in terms of our membership levels and our projected levels of income. So there are no plans at this point in time to close any identified libraries or community facilities. What we have said, though, is that if there are changes to our funding or our earned income over the course of the next year, we would have to look at that for the financial year 24-25, and that would feature in the business plan that would be brought to council this time next year.
Thank you, Mr. McCreevy. Are you going to say anything in this, Lorraine, given that Phil Dawes isn't here? Thanks.
We'll try to cover the question. If I understand, it was about some of the capital aspects. So just to confirm that all the buildings that the Trust use are still in the ownership of the council. Before any buildings were closed or the services stopped, there would be discussion and have to be approval by the council of that. But in particular, you asked about Eastwood Changing Village. That, because the building is owned by the council, the budget for any repairs and maintenance and any capital works is within the council budget. And you'll see in the line later on in the revenue estimates, there's actually a line where we show the money that goes to the trust, but separately under culture and leisure there's a line for property maintenance, and in the capital budget you'll see separate lines in the capital budget. So all those budgets are part of the capital funding of the council. And I think it's fair to say in all our capital projects there has been a great deal of inflation over the last few years. Construction inflation has been running extremely high, so we are having to, through our capital project during the year, our quotes are coming in higher than we'd originally planned. Some of the estimates were done pre-COVID, so there can be quite a big difference in the quotes. In Eastwood Changing Village, it was actually work that wasn't expected, that couldn't have been foreseen without invasive surveys. So when they started to do the work, there was some extra work. So that's what Cabinet approved, was that extra work, so that we can get the Eastwood Changing Village opened as quickly as possible. There is an implication of capital works for the Trust, as Anthony will continually remind us, quite rightly so, that if we undertake any work in a building and the building's closed, the Trust have a reduction in income, and we usually, as part of our business plan, if it's for planned maintenance, we have a discussion of what those levels of income would be and temporarily adjust the funding for the Trust to account for that. So there is a link to the Trust, but the capital work is under the ownership of the council, not the Trust. So I hope that captured your question.
Councillor Ireland.
Thank you very much, Provost. Yes, thank you very much for that, and thank you very much, Anthony. I suppose my question, the second question, really wasn't so much around Eastwood Changing Village. It was just around, I'm very concerned, and I spoke out at the last meeting. It's just that 2-year delay, and saying that it was 7 million. So I suppose I'm concerned, given construction costs could be 50%, running at 50%, is that 7 million still stand? Or is there a likelihood that that could increase? I suppose that's what I'm trying to get to. If it's still the same, that's wonderful. Well, it's not wonderful, it's still 7 million. But if there's any information on that, that would be fantastic. Or is there any information to be coming?
I'm sorry, Councillor Ireland, I'm a wee bit confused with what you're asking. This item is about the Culture and Leisure Trust.
Yes.
And so I'm a bit confused about the 7 million figure, so if you could perhaps tell us what page that's on.
Yes.
in the business plan, and that might help me understand. It might be a question for Anthony if it's in this paper.
Well, no, I was referring back to a previous full council meeting because I had a concern that because construction costs were so high that, and this does affect the Leisure Trust quite a bit. I was concerned that figure had risen.
Sorry, Councillor Ireland, I'm advised that issue that you've just raised could be picked up through the capital programme later on the agenda.
I'll make sure and do that.
All right then, thank you. Councillor Bamforth.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Page 145, I would like to ask Anthony about that. It's
145.
145.
Give us a second to get there, thanks.
It's the risk management, item 12. There's a particular mention of facility failure of number 4. The likelihood on this matrix is 5, which is almost certain, and the impact is major, number 4. As Councillor Ireland mentioned, we as a group we were very concerned about this previously, which is why we didn't want the delay. It is a 50-year-old facility, and we know there have been it had to close down several times over the past few years due to major issues with it. I just wonder what the implications from what Ms McCreevy has just said and Mrs McMillan has just said. It looks like the implications of a major failure of the facility that financially the council would pick up the cost of that. So I would like to know what the implications are, because this risk matrix says it's almost certain, which is very worrying. And also, if that is the case, what are the contingency plans? Because I believe that the Culture and Leisure Trust, the leisure centres and things, are funded by, so things like libraries, etc., which are, you don't get revenue from them, they are funded by the leisure centre. So there would be, I presume, ongoing implications, not just for the leisure centre, but other parts of the Culture and Leisure Trust. So my questions are around the implications, who will pick up the bill if the almost certain failure is mentioned here, and also what is the contingency plan if that happens. Thank you.
If you, I'll ask Anthony to respond at first. Thank you.
Thank you. As the Chief Executive outlined before, we have a mechanism in place for covering the cost or the financial implications of any unplanned closure. So we discussed that with the council, and the management fee is usually adjusted to compensate for that. That means that there wouldn't necessarily be a knock-on effect in terms of any other services like libraries or any of the charitable activities we do. The reason the certainty is so high is, as you mentioned, we've actually not had many years where we haven't had an unplanned closure of one of the facilities. Typically, they of a small scale and they cause disruption to the customers, but they're not usually major, though we have had plant failure in some of the leisure centres that have been more significant. And of course, it is something that we have to manage going forward with an old building. We're in constant discussion with our colleagues in the council around the maintenance and some of the issues, and we'll be looking to try and mitigate those if we can with some spend or preventative work over the course of the next 2 to 3 years in terms of the leisure centre. The issue for us is not just the cessation of services, but obviously the disruption to customers, and that can sometimes have a long tail in that customers may decide to take their custom elsewhere. So we try and manage that as best we can, and generally speaking, we've been able to maintain the levels of customer satisfaction and membership without too much impact from closures. So it's something that we continue to discuss internally, but also with our partners.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr McCreevy. Councillor Morrison.
Thank you, Provost. A lot of the debate so far seems to be orientated around the facility at Eastwood Leisure Centre. I just wanted to ask Mr McAreavy if there's any views in terms of facility failure at Neilston Leisure Centre, because obviously a decision has been made on that, and I see that there is obviously provision within the capital plan for a new leisure facility in Neilston. So I just think that we should be mindful that it's not all about Eastwood Leisure. There's also the Neilston facility as well.
Thanks, Councillor Morrison. Mr McAreavy.
Yeah, the risk matrix that's shown in the business plan isn't particular to any one facility. It represents the risk across all of the portfolio, but primarily it is the leisure centre. And you're right, the two centres at Eastwood and Neilston are both 50 years old and are the cause of kind of greatest concern. Obviously, the disruption from Neilston isn't as significant in terms of volume, but it is clearly felt by the community. So we just have to be mindful of both of those, and see if the refurbishment or the redevelopment of that site can go ahead. Then that would be welcome.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, can we agree the report?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much. Now on to item 11, which is the service concession arrangements, and we have the Head of Accounting, Margaret McCrossan, and the Chief Accountant, Barbara Clark, in the chamber to help with any questions. So the report is seeking approval for the write-off of the liability held in the Council's balance sheet for its 5 service concession arrangements over the lives of the assets instead of the lives of the contracts, in line with the Local Government Finance Circular 10/2022, and asking the Council to note the longer-term implications of implementing this flexibility, including the affordability assessment outlined in paragraph 13. Are there any questions or comments on this? Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you, Provost. It's really a comment, and it's really to thank Margaret McCrossan and the team for working really hard to be able to deliver this really welcome relief, which I'm sure everyone in this chamber will recognise in terms of the impact that it has on not just this year's budget, but in future years' budget as well. Huge amount of work and external advice as well to make sure that this is all fit and proper for what we need to do, and it fits with all the accounting standards. So I'd just really like to thank the work that they've done for the Council on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Councillor Morrison, and then Councillor Wallace online.
Thank you very much, Provost. Really, as Chair of Audit Scrutiny, I just wanted to ask, this is something which other councils in Scotland will be taking up. This is arising from a local government finance circular. It's not something autonomously being decided by East Renfrewshire Council. I just wondering if one of the finance team could clarify that. Thank you.
Margaret, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. Yes, I'm happy to confirm that this is it's a new flexibility that's been granted to all Scottish authorities to exercise either in this financial year or next financial year. And I understand that at least half of the authorities appear to be moving in that direction, and quite a number have already approved this as part of their budget plans for 23/4.
Councillor Wallace online.
Thank you, Provost. It's just to get clear that that this isn't suddenly some kind of magnificent windfall, and is very much just it is a paper exercise, and it's really like someone homeowner is taking a 25-year mortgage and then saying, no, I can't afford it, I'll make it 50 years. And if we go into other models in other countries, before you know it, you've got mortgages that are 100-year mortgages. So the reality is we're going to be paying for something over a longer period of time, and could well find ourselves paying for assets which are beyond their useful life. So it's just to get real here, is that the money, as we know, is not there. So we're having to find, our Scottish Government is having to find mechanisms which allows councils like ourselves to to spread our costs over a much longer period of time. I don't believe it is it's good policy, but unfortunately it's a policy we're having to follow, and I don't think we've got any other option. But I just want to get that over. This is not new money. This is just borrowed money over a longer period of time, which will ultimately be more expensive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. Margaret, would you like to respond to that or wait to other questions? You want to take it one at a time? Right, thank you very much.
Yes, I can understand the concerns that Councillor Wallace is expressing, but just to provide a wee bit of assurance on this, and we are limiting ourselves to the period over which we spread the debt liability for each asset. The absolute maximum would be the asset life that is determined by our professional valuers. So they follow a professional code and say what the life of any building is expected to be. Now, if we were building a school, for example, of our own, we would expect that to last 50 years. These PFI concessions are paid for at the moment in a contract over 25 years, and they're well maintained as they have to be as part of the contract. So we are absolutely certain that we would expect them to last another 25 years, and that it is appropriate to therefore share the debt costs over the full life of the asset. We are not doing anything different with the asset life for those schools than we would do for a school we built ourselves. So there is continuity across all the asset base, just to give you that reassurance.
Councillor Buchanan.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. Mr McCrossan just covered some of the points I made. It's an accounting mechanism in effect, and there has been a fairly lengthy ongoing discussion between COSLA on behalf of all authorities and all finance officers, if you like, who took the position that taking the cost of borrowing over the lifetime of the asset would free up sufficient revenue and enable us to manage things going forward during a very difficult time. That argument, I suppose, was eventually won with Scottish Government, who agreed just a couple of months back that was a valid way forward. But it is an accounting mechanism, as has been highlighted, but it is based on the fact that the life of an asset is significantly longer than the period we were initially being paying for the asset, and so it enables us to free up that cash and hopefully continue delivering on premises and services across our respective authorities. Thank you.
Okay, can we agree the report? Agreed, thank you. Moving on now to item 12, financial planning 2023 to 2029. The report is asking the Council to note continuing budget pressures in the next 6 years and mitigating actions, and approve the updated outline revenue financial plan for 2023-29. So I'll now invite any comments or questions, and again, Margaret McCrossan, the Head of Accountancy, is on hand to answer any questions. Are there any points, comments, questions? Are we agreeing the report? Agreed? Okay, thank you. Colleagues, I'm just trying to arrange the timing and the addressing of the agenda items so that it fits in and there's enough time for everything. So we've rattled through the agenda so far, so we're ahead of what I expected it to be. So I'm going to have a recess just now, and I'll hand over to Eamon to explain what's going to be furnished for you. Okay, thank you, Eamon.
Thank you, Provost. Yeah, as you've suggested, it's proposed to have a short 20-minute recess just now, and come back after that to consider the item 13 and then move into the budget. I do have copies of the administration motion and copies of the amendment, which I will circulate just now, and that will give people the opportunity to have a look at them during the recess, and then we can come back and we can reconvene and get into the budget discussions.
Is that agreed, everybody? Agreed. Okay, so I will close this part of the meeting. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, colleagues. And after our recess, we are back ready to continue with the agenda. And the next item is item 13, and that's the strategic impact of the financial settlement. So the report is primarily for noting there are recommendations there, also asking for agreement for the Council to lobby COSLA in recommendation F, but I will invite Lorraine to speak to the report. Thank you, Lorraine.
Thank you, Provost. I just wanted to give a very short introduction. So my paper sets out the broad context for council budgets over the last 15 years and looks at pressures which are specific to East Renfrewshire Council. Like much of the public sector across the UK, the value of councils' core budgets have not kept up with inflation. Initially, some of the inflationary pressures could be absorbed through efficiencies and transformation, but that has become increasingly difficult. For this year alone, an inflationary rise would have added about £22 million in government grant, rather than the £1.5 million the Council received on a like-for-like basis. However, our top-line budgets have grown through funding for new initiatives. These initiatives offer new and valued services to our residents, but the long-term funding is insufficient. These new services often eat into budgets for our core services. For example, we now have less money to spend on our core service of roads and refuse collection, but we do have more teachers and staff in nurseries, which is very welcome. All councils are under pressure financially, but in East Renfrewshire, the pressures do seem greater. My paper shows the impact of the floors mechanism, which is intended to smooth out major changes in councils' budgets, but instead it now seems to be serving to protect budgets. The councils most affected are those with growing populations. The impact of the high number of children we educate is also highlighted. Education is a real strength of the area and much valued by our residents. However, it does have a disproportionate impact on funding for other services if the education budget is protected. The paper concludes by discussing the impact of many years of savings on our capacity as an organisation and focus on some of the strategic actions we can take to ensure council services are sustainable. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you very much, Chief Executive. Are there any comments or questions on the paper? Yeah, I know, I see. Just seeing if anybody else is. Councillor Ireland.
Thank you very much, Provost. Yes, thank you very much for the paper. I just had a couple of questions, both of which are on page 179.
Councillor Ireland, can you confirm that number? That's not the number at the top of the page for my report.
1 second. Oh, yes, I have. 17. No, you're right. It's not that. If you just give me 1 second. It's the point on partnership working.
you found the page number, Councillor Ireland, to assist
Just looking
colleagues?
at 189.
Is there a paragraph in particular you're referring to, Councillor
There
Ireland?
is. 1 second. I can't believe. I apologise that I've taken the numbers down incorrectly. I did have questions on it. Was partnership working and the implementation of digital transformation strategy. Apologies if I've these questions referred to the previous paper, but I had it down on my notes that it was paper 13.
Is there a specific question? There is a very short, there is a mention of partnership working in paragraph 24 under best value. Could it have been there?
I think it is, because if I read out, I think it will become clear when I read out. Yes. Yes, it does. Yes, 189. Apologies.
Okay. Councillor Ireland, the reference to partnership working apparently was a previous paper, so unless you have a particular specific question on this.
About best value and effective use of resources, partnerships and collaborative working. So I think this question still stands for this. It is just a question around partnership working.
Okay, if you give us your question then please, we can move on.
I'm very interested in that. It's something that's quite important to me, is looking at commercialisation opportunities, especially with our neighbouring councils. And I'm wondering if there's anything that we're working on at the moment with our neighbours that would help us increase any commercialisation opportunities. For example, around roads, street lighting, trading standards, or staff training development, procurement in particular might be, or regional economic development. Is there anything at all that we're working on with our neighbours? I'm aware of this sort of overarching group plans that we have, but this is more particular council to council. Is there anything that we have plans to develop out that would help with commercialisation, driving that forward?
So I think rather than commercialisation, if I can answer in terms of shared services and cost saving. So we have some successful shared services already. A very small scale one, but excellent, is our shared civil contingency service, which was introduced many years ago. It has been absolutely excellent and is actually now saving us money as more councils have joined. City Region, we are doing more and more with on a shared basis, as you'll have seen things like Shared Prosperity Fund working jointly through the City Region work, and that's been very powerful in bringing more money into the area and more money into particularly our council as well. So that, and we are at a regional level looking to see what more we can do in that area. Obviously any plans would have to be brought back to council. We're constantly looking to see if there's ways that we can save money. Shared services are very, very difficult to do well, but there are some that can be done, so we're looking to learn from those. And there's some national work going on as well in that, that we'll be involved in discussing about what the opportunities are as we look forward. So I didn't go through it in this paper in any detail, but it's certainly something that the teams are looking at. And there's discussions in most of the teams about what could be done. We will leave no stone unturned to find efficiencies.
Thank you. Councillor O'Donnell and Councillor Wallace, I see there's a hand up. Is that for this item? It's not a legacy hand, that's fine. Okay, Councillor O'Donnell, then Councillor Wallace, if anybody else would like to indicate, and I'll add you to my list.
Thanks very much, Provost. I really welcome this report from the Chief Executive. I think it's helpful for all members to have a bit of context setting for why we are where we are and why we're making the decisions we are in the budget today. There's a lot of very specific points there which actually I think brings to light why we're struggling with our finances at this stage. And a lot of those we can sort of pursue through COSLA with government and to get fairer funding settlement, which I'm sure all of us agree with that. But there are very specific structural issues around some of the grants of these awards, which hopefully we can make progress with, which is important, and so that we can make progress and have a genuine partnership with the Scottish Government, because at the moment it certainly doesn't feel that way. So I really welcome this. I think this is going to be a good reference document for all members over the coming months and years as we think about how best we navigate the financial circumstances we are in now and in the next 3 years at least. So I really welcome that, and thanks to the Chief Exec for preparing this report.
Thank you. Councillor Wallace.
Thank you. Just to thank the Chief Executive for this paper. I'm delighted to see that she's actually finally been given the freedom to state where the blame lies for these dreadful cuts that we are facing just now. I mean, don't get me wrong, a number of these initiatives that do come through for additional, like free school meals, all these initiatives are all very worthy. But I think a key point that the Chief Executive is making here is for Scottish Government, the second bullet point at the end, for Scottish Government to assess the value of new services against existing services to ensure that priorities continue to be funding. Because all this new money, supposed new money that we are getting, is all ring-fenced for these new initiatives. And as a result of these, we have to make cuts to our existing services. So the question is, do these new services actually compensate for those that we are losing? And invariably, it's the council that gets the blame when we know actually that the blame lies firmly at the door of Holyrood. I'll say no more. Thank you, and thanks once again to the Chief Executive, and we can hopefully now benefit over 15 years of her experience before she leaves, that we can get some more of this very valuable advice. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs McMillan.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wallace. I just want to make one thing clear. No place in my paper have I suggested who's responsible. What I've done is a factual comment on the situation that we face. There are many, many complex reasons behind the funding of the challenge of funding of councils right across the UK. And maybe public sector, I'm guessing, across the wider than the UK as well. So at absolutely no place in the paper have I blamed anyone. I've done a factual paper talking about what's happened over a long time. The reasons behind it are very, very complex. With coronavirus, the crash in 2008, there's a whole load of different reasons that have led to this. In fact, it's a very large number of circumstances that have led to the council funding situation, and I tried to bring that in the paper. So this is not a political paper. I understand people may want to make political points, and that's of course you're right, but my paper is a factual comment on our situation to help get everybody with that basic understanding of the situation we're in. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Chief Executive, and thank you for the report, but also for your input and your stewardship over the 15 years that you have been Chief Executive. Councillor Buchanan, were you indicating there? Yeah. All right, okay.
Yeah, can I thank Chief Executive for the report again? I think it does touch on many of the aspects that are responsible perhaps for the situation of local government funding. And the Chief Executive is right, local government across the UK has suffered significantly over the last number of years. And primarily, it's been UK government and an austerity drive that has created that, both for the devolved governments and for all local authorities. And working with and speaking to many colleagues across the UK, that everyone is in a very similar position in relation to that, and perhaps even more so now. So I welcome the report. I think it does highlight many of the complex issues that we have to juggle and have to deal with on an ongoing basis, and it doesn't get any easier. as we are about to discuss. There are many difficulties and issues that continue to arise, but thank you very much for the report, Larry. Appreciate it.
Councillor Wallace, is that a legacy hand, or did you want to? Okay, yes it is. So again, thank you very much. Oh, sorry, Councillor Wallace, yes?
It's not a legacy hand. It was just to come back. I wasn't suggesting that this was a political paper at all. It is a very factual paper, and it was just to thank her for that. And the facts quite simply speak for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, and once again to our Chief Executive, thank you for the report. Oh, sorry, Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much, Provost. Can also welcome the Chief Executive's work on this very important paper, which I think will be a good legacy if we can change the direction of the finance of local government in Scotland as a result. I don't want to make it party political, so I know that it's a matter of political debate as to what's happening with the Scottish Government's budget and how much that is in real terms or actual terms, and how much that relates to in previous years. So let's set that aside at the moment. But the SNP say the size of the pie is not getting bigger. But it's an irrefutable fact that the slice of the pie has got smaller over the last 10 years. In fact, there's a COSLA report in March 2022 which says the proportion of the Scottish Government's budget, irrespective of how much that is in real terms, the amount of that given to local government has fallen from 34% in the 2013-14 year to 28% in the 22-23 year. So irrespective of how much the Scottish Government block grant is from the UK Government, they're given a smaller proportion of what they do have to local government, and that's the reason why we have the issues we face today. And I think that could be taken as an apolitical point. It's simply an observation of fact. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, colleagues, the report is for noting and the recommendations A to E, but also asking for agreement for the Council to lobby COSLA with regard to its contained in recommendation F. So can we agree that? Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to item 14, East Renfrewshire Council Revenue Estimates 2023-24. So can I have your consent to allow the movers of the motions and the amendments to exceed the time limits on speaking? Agreed? Agreed. Thank you. I would like to invite, first of all, Councillor O'Donnell to propose the motion. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Provost. So to outline the administration's motion for the budget, first, and you've all got copies in front of you, and it's also on screen for those joining online. Firstly, notes the revenue estimates of 23-24 and Annex A have been prepared on the basis of a 5% council tax increase, the utilisation of 10.2 million of new resources made available through fiscal flexibilities agreed by the Scottish Government, and savings proposals of 4.7 million. 2 notes that 0.281 of the listed 23-24 savings, together with those relating to the increased charges for garden waste, have already been determined by Council earlier today. 3 notes that a 1% change to the level of Council tax set would produce an adjustment of 0.632 million to the level of savings required. And notes the savings of 24-25 and 25-26 have been estimated at £9.2 million and £9.8 million respectively, based on full utilisation of the remaining fiscal flexibilities and council tax increases of 3% for these years. 5 agrees that the management of the council finances and services will continue to be undertaken on a longer term basis. 6 that the council tax band D level for 23-24 will be set at £1,415.22, which is a 6% rise. 6 that 10.2 million of fiscal flexibilities will be utilised, and approves a number of savings for implementation in 23-24 to a value of 4.1 million, as shown in Appendix B, amended as in the two following tables, as shown below. In this table, we've got saving items reversed and new investments. The new investment is to create a £60,000 participatory budgeting fund to support children with additional support needs in Isabel Mer School, Carlybar Communication Centre, William Wood ASN Unit and the Carrollside ASN Unit. In terms of specific savings reversal, we propose to save the reduced behaviour support PSAs who support pupils across secondary schools, to reverse 2.4, removal of funding for Dreams Come True, Specialist Therapies and Chaos Club, to reverse Edu 3.15, which is remove funding for campus police officers, 3.4, reduction in the private sector housing grant, which is care and repair, and to adjust for 7.6 and 7.7 for the impact of the garden waste bin charges at £50, which was agreed earlier. Number 8.8, approve savings of £2 million for implementation in 24-25 to permit preparatory work to be undertaken, as shown in Appendix B, with the exception of those savings reversals identified in 7 above, and with the exception of the items listed below. Requests that work is undertaken on the following proposed savings, and a report brought back to Council in October prior to implementation. These include 3.5, the reduction in janitorial services, 3.7, reduction in cleaning services, 3.3, reduction in psychological services, 2.5, reduction in school crossing patrollers, 3.1, redesign of mixed tenure, and 3.2, Connor Road. So that I propose that motion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dolan. Is there a seconder? You're seconding the motion. Okay, thank you. I don't need you to speak yet. Thank you. Are there any amendments? Councillor Buchanan, and is there a seconder?
Yeah, we do have a seconder.
Councillor Bamford. Okay, if you would read out, please, your amendment, Councillor Buchanan.
Happy to do so, Provost. Thank you for the opportunity. I'll go over the first part, which clearly, as the motions are initially similar. Item 1 notes that the revenue estimates for 23-24 Annex A have been prepared on the basis of a 5% council tax increase, the utilisation of 10.231 million of new resources made available through fiscal flexibilities agreed by the Scottish Government, and saving proposals of 4.742 million, which is Annex B. We note that 0.281 million of the listed 23-24 savings, together with those relating to the increased charges for garden waste, have already been determined by the Council. Notice that a 1% change to the level of council tax would produce an adjustment of 0.632 million to the level of savings required. Notes that the savings for 24-25 and 25-26 have been estimated at 9.2 and 9.8 million respectively, based on the full utilisation of the remaining fiscal flexibilities and council tax increases of 3% for these years. Agrees that the management of the Council's finances and services will continue to be undertaken on a longer-term basis. Moving on to where differences begin. Item 6 determines that the Council tax band D level for 23-24 will be set at £1,408.54, which is a 5.5% council tax increase. Item 7 determines that 10.731 million of fiscal flexibilities will be utilised, and approves a number of savings for implementation in 23-24 to the value of 3.083 million, as shown in Appendix B, excluding those listed in the table below, which I'll cover shortly, together with additional investment of 100,000 to support pupils with additional support needs, This is based on our share of the recently announced additional £100 million of Scottish Government funding for the current 23-24 pay offers, providing us with sufficient leeway of at least £0.943 million to allow us to step back from some of the original savings options mentioned in Annex B. In terms of the payment, the £100,000, we would look to see that utilised by education, by its various partners, the Leisure Trust, by the HSCP, to ensure the well-being of our additional support needs children across the authority, providing to set up play schemes and support across the area to ensure that that can be done. Item 8 does not approve any of the identified in Annex B for implementation in 24-25 to permit preparatory work to be undertaken. Instead, we propose that following the outcome of the UK and Scottish budgets, both of which will happen in weeks to come, a further report be brought back to Council to seek approval for any such preparatory work. Given that that work can't be done until we have those figures, I see little point in moving that forward at the moment. In terms of the savings that we would be rejected and the new investment proposed, Education 2.2, reduce behaviour support PSAs who support pupils across our secondary school. We all know the value that they deliver, and we would not take that cut. The reduction in other staff groups, excluding teachers, that includes our technicians, our bilingual support teachers, our school librarians, we would protect those services. Education 2.4, the removal of funding.
Councillor Buchanan, could you stick to the terms of the motion, and you'll get a chance later on to do your
the reduction, removal of the Dreams Come True Specialist Therapies and Cares Club, reduction in centrally based business support and budget teams, reduction in centrally based support posts, the removal of early intervention and prevention resource, remove the funding for campus police officers, reduce adult learning staffing, and create, as was mentioned, an additional support needs wellbeing fund. Increase burial charges, reduce roads network management, and the adjusted increase for the garden waste collections, which were altered earlier. We cover those costs under our environment proposals. Business operation and partnerships, the customer first, reductions in staff and service, our community learning and development, our staff and service reductions we wouldn't take. Water Direct and the introduction of deductions for that, our ICT education technicians and reductions, the ICT staff reductions, the strategic services staff reductions. The total savings increased investment would be at 1.759.1 million. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buchanan. So the motion and amendment have both been duly moved and seconded. I will now invite Councillor O'Donnell to present the budget. Thank you.
Good to go?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Provost. It's a real privilege for me to present my first budget proposals as Council Leader, and the first on behalf of our new administration following last May's Council elections. But it gives me no pleasure whatsoever to be having to outline cuts to our services as a result of the unfair funding settlement we have received from the Scottish Government. Today is also our first budget meeting to be held in person since 2020 due to COVID-19 restrictions, and I am pleased to see so many of my fellow councillors here in person today. While most of the restrictions which came with the pandemic are thankfully behind us, many people and businesses in East Renfrewshire were hit hard by COVID and continue to be so. And in the last year, just as we were looking to recover from the pandemic, Most people have instead faced major new challenges as a result of the cost of living crisis. Spiralling inflation and soaring energy costs have combined to cause genuine hardship for many of our residents, and they have rightly looked to their local council for support. I'm immensely proud my administration has been able to give them practical support, putting money in their pockets to help with food bills and creating a network of warm and welcome spaces. We will continue to support those most in need and continue to plan for the future, building more new schools and council houses and caring for older people. But we also have to be upfront about the scale of the financial challenges faced by the Council and how that is likely to impact many of the vital services we currently provide. As part of this honest conversation, we announced in October that East Renfrewshire Council was facing a funding shortfall of more than £30 million over the next 3 years. The main reason for this is that the Council is facing the same challenges as everyone else in terms of rising energy costs and high inflation. Yet we have received barely any extra cash on a like-for-like basis from the Scottish Government to fund our services. This £30 million black hole means we are having to make some very difficult decisions about services which local people rely on. Levels of service will be reduced, or in some cases may stop altogether. Council tax will increase and jobs will be at risk. Back in October, we outlined the painful cuts we were having to consider and encouraged residents and staff to tell us what our spending priorities should be and what ideas they had to help us balance the books. More than 1,700 people shared their views with us, the biggest response we've ever had to an engagement exercise like this in the Council's history. And councillors have considered your views very carefully. My thanks to everyone who took part. Your views are important to us and have been reflected in this budget. It remains the case that East Renfrewshire Council is facing very serious financial challenges which will impact many of the vital services we provide. Most of the Council's funding comes from the Scottish Government in our annual grant settlement. Residents are often rightly concerned about what their council tax is spent on, but it is important to remember the money raised from council tax only accounts for around 18%, less than 1/5 of our total funding. It has also been a growing trend in recent years that the money we receive from the Scottish Government comes with strings attached and can often only be spent on national policy initiatives. These include important services like the expansion of early years childcare, moving towards universal free school meals in primary schools, and paying the real living wage to those working in social care. These are initiatives we support, but it does leave us with less flexibility on what we can spend money on here in East Renfrewshire. It is also the case that much of our funding can only be spent on specific projects, such as housing or transport, and can't be used in other areas. That lack of freedom for local politicians also restricts us when it comes to making savings, with some parts of our spending protected from cuts. This means areas such as roads, parks, refuse collection and money advice for the most vulnerable often face more pressure. Just a few weeks ago, we were notified of more planned restrictions on education spending by the Scottish Government. In East Renfrewshire, we are proud to provide the best council-run schools in the country, a success built on making the best decisions locally to suit our local circumstances. Denying councils the power to decide how best to close the attainment gap will only mean more cuts to other essential services. For 23-24, our grant settlement from the Scottish Government is £223 million, 0.1. This represents a small increase on last year, but much of that has again been committed to national priorities, leaving us with 1.5 million extra. Once an increased bill for buildings, such as increased rates bill for buildings such as our schools and offices is factored in, the council is actually left with £800,000 extra, an increase of just 0.4% on a like-for-like basis on last year's settlement. Given that the council has been hit by the same financial challenges as everyone else over the last year, it is clear that small amount of extra money falls well short of what we require to even attempt to maintain current levels of service. And coupled with the £80 million in savings which we've already had to make since 2015-16 due to years of underfunding, that has left the council's finances in a perilous position. When we announced in October that the council was facing a budget gap of more than £30 million over the next 3 years, I warned then that with no extra money likely to come our way from the Scottish Government, we would have to consider cutting services and jobs. The year ahead was always going to be the toughest, and our budget gap for 23-24 stands at £18.1 million. There are a number of ways we can bridge this funding shortfall. We can raise more income by increasing council tax or charging more for services. We can use any remaining reserves, or we can make cuts to services. We can also work with the Scottish Government to see if the rules around our budgets can be more flexible. On this issue of what are known as fiscal flexibilities, we have received some good news, which allows us to spread the debt charges on certain major infrastructure projects like new schools. This is the approach we will take after agreeing the service concessions paper earlier in today's agenda. We will receive a one-off benefit of £14.8 million to our financial reserves, plus savings of around £2.7 million a year, plus recurring savings of around £2.7 million a year, starting from 23-24. In the year ahead, we will use 7.5 of this one-off money, together with the 2.7 million recurring saving, to reduce our budget gap from 18.1 million to 7.9 million. We have decided not to use all these reserves at once, so we can spread the benefit over the following 2 years, when we will also face very challenging savings targets. Our officers' financial modelling for this budget is based on a 5% rise in council tax. And although we are implementing cuts and using our reserves, a 5% increase would still not be enough to completely close our funding gap. As a result, and as outlined in my earlier motion, I am today recommending East Renfrewshire Council increases council tax by 6% for 23-24, which will reduce the levels of cuts required. It is worth pointing out that to close our budget gap over the next 3 years by only using council tax and not making any service cuts would mean a rise of more than 50% in council tax bills. The 6% increase I am recommending is almost half the rate of inflation we have seen in recent months, but I fully accept another increase in household bills will impact many people. However, if we had not opted to raise council tax by this level, we would have had to make further reductions in funding to our schools, our roads, our parks and our waste collection services. For a Band D property in East Renfrewshire, this will mean an annual increase in council tax of £80.11 or £1.54 a week. And there will be smaller increases for the almost one-third of our 41,000 households who already receive a 25% single-person discount. If they live in a Band D property, they will instead pay just £1.16 a week more. Families on low incomes, who make up about 11% or almost 4,500 of all households in East Renfrewshire, will not have to pay the full increase, with some households continuing to pay no council tax at all, because of their circumstances. Just as we have offered the most vulnerable people in our communities direct financial assistance as part of our cost of living support, so they will also be protected from the proposed increase in council tax. It is also important to note that in the last 10 years, council tax bands in East Renfrewshire have been below the Scottish average and are expected to remain around the Scottish average in the coming year. And this is whilst consistently delivering well above average vital services. Increasing council tax will reduce the size of our £7.9 million budget gap for the year ahead, but it will not close the gap completely. To do that, we will have to make £4.1 million of savings in the next year, and that will impact many of our vital services. To ensure the public are fully aware of what we are proposing, a detailed list of these measures can be found in the annex to the Revenue Estimates report in today's Council papers. I want to be absolutely clear that we do not want to make these cuts, but we must take these difficult decisions to meet the legal requirements to balance our books. And the fact is that, unless there is increased funding for local government, further severe cuts will be required in the future. Our challenging financial situation also has serious implications for the important work of the East Renfrewshire Health and Social Care Partnership and our Culture and Leisure Trust. The proposed budget contributions to the Integration Joint Board, which oversees the work of the HSCP, and to the Leisure Trust, will have to be limited due to the financial constraints the Council is facing. Confirmation of these contributions will allow the boards of both these organisations to plan their spending for the year ahead, but it is highly likely they will have to make considerable cuts. The IJB will set its budget at the end of March. By using reserves, increasing council tax and implementing £4.1 million worth of savings, we will balance the books for the next 12 months. But current estimates show we will have a budget gap of a further £16.2 million in 24-25 and then a further £14.2 million in 25-26. The graph on the screens show the size of these budget gaps and how much in savings we predict we will have to take to close the gap. £9.3 million worth of savings in 24-25 and £10 million in 25-26. These savings will inevitably include more cuts to services and jobs unless the Scottish Government increases our funding. Despite the unprecedented financial challenges facing the Council, we continue to plan for a better future for all our residents. We are building more new schools and handing over more new council houses to local people. The funding for long-term projects, such as investment in new schools and nurseries, is part of our capital budget, which is separate from the money spent on day-to-day services through our revenue budget. Our savings must come from these important services, and money can't normally be moved from the long-term to the day-to-day budget to help. There are also many pots of funding which can only be spent on specific projects. So, for example, we can't spend City Deal money on education or social care money on repairing potholes. Like all councils, East Renfrewshire has to stick to these rules. But we remain absolutely committed to delivering as many projects to improve the lives of our residents as we can. I would like now to focus on some of the excellent projects we are delivering. I was delighted to attend the official opening of Cross Arthurley Primary's nursery class in November. This was the last of our 6 new nurseries to have opened across East Renfrewshire in recent years as part of our commitment to expanding early learning and childcare provision. We will continue to provide the very best for all our children and young people, especially at this crucial early years stage. We also remain committed to providing for our vulnerable young people. Pupils at Isabel Mer School have already benefited from an upgraded sports pitch this year, and we are planning to spend more than £1 million on increasing the size of this excellent school. In June, we broke ground at the new Neilson Learning Campus, and I've watched with interest as building work has progressed. My thanks to local residents for their patience during construction, and I'm sure we're all looking forward to seeing the campus open its doors later this year. The site will provide a new home for pupils from Neilson Primary, St Thomas's Primary and the Madras Family Centre. Our aim is to provide the very best environment to support young people's learning. Pupils across East Renfrewshire delivered another year of record-breaking exam results, confirming our status as having the best council-run schools in Scotland. It is testament to these young people who were sitting formal exams for the first time due to the pandemic, and to their parents and our staff, that they produced excellent results across the board, including many schools delivering their best ever performances. The Council's investment in education goes further than new buildings, with facilities to support sport, health and well-being also being provided. I'm delighted a new synthetic pitch and running track is soon due to be completed at Mern Castle High School, replacing a 40-year-old glazed playing field which was unfit for purpose. We're also focused on improving and extending the services provided in our schools. So I'm delighted a new additional supports needs unit will be established in Carrollside Primary at the start of the new school term in August. In July, we opened our biggest ever council house development on Balgaston Road, Barrhead, creating high quality and energy efficient homes for more than 200 tenants. The last year also saw the completion of 57 council houses in Maidenhill, including a number we'll be handing over to tenants in the next few weeks. Support for local employers remains a key priority for East Renfrewshire Council, and less than 2 weeks ago I opened the Greenlaw Works Business Centre in Newton Mearns. A range of local firms are now located at this impressive facility, which is our most significant City Deal project to be delivered so far. Our commitment to reducing the Council's carbon emissions remains strong, and we've made significant progress in the past year. In November, we agreed our target is to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2045. Our forthcoming Get to Zero action plan will set out what work is needed to reduce emissions. But we have to be clear, we will need significant additional funding to help us meet our targets. Working in partnership with local people is key to achieving such goals, and their contribution was highlighted by East Renfrewshire reclaiming its position as the top recycling area in Scotland. The condition of our roads remains a key priority, and the Council's capital investment programme I'll repeat myself. The condition of our roads remains a key priority, and the Council's capital investment programme to spend an extra £3 million a year on resurfacing local roads continues to deliver. In total, another 64 resurfacing projects are on track to be completed during the current year, benefiting communities across East Renfrewshire. This extra capital investment was due to finish next year, but I am delighted to be able to reveal today that we now plan to continue this popular improvement programme for another 5 years, spending more money, £3.5 million a year, on upgrading roads and pavements. Combined with other projects, we will spend £33.8 million on improving local roads in the next 10 years. As I mentioned at the beginning of my speech, I was immensely proud to deliver a £4.4 million cost of living package to support our most vulnerable residents. The Council distributed £100 gift cards to more than 4,500 low-income households, helping people directly with their food bills and boosting local traders who signed up to the scheme. This cost of living package, which was funded by COVID recovery money from the Scottish Government, also supported the creation of a network of warm and welcome spaces. Our libraries and leisure centres were among the first warm and welcome spaces, offering a hot drink and advice to local people. It was important that this project should be community-led, so residents could choose what would work best for them, and we set up a fund worth £100,000 to help local groups heat their buildings and provide refreshments and activities. Working closely with Voluntary Action, there are now 38 warm and welcome spaces across East Renfrewshire offering support to all residents. HSCP staff have once again done a fantastic job in very challenging circumstances. Our care at home team, nurses and GPs remain on the very front line of healthcare and do their very best to help some of our most vulnerable residents. Like all social care providers, we have faced significant problems recruiting and retaining care at home staff, and that caused particular challenges over Christmas. But we continue to perform well compared to other HSCPs on the crucial issue of delayed discharges, which frees up NHS beds and ensures older and vulnerable residents are able to live in their own homes wherever possible. Our growing population of older people and the continued impact of COVID present additional tests on top of the financial challenges we face. But our top priority remains to protect the most vulnerable members of our communities. More than £1 million is being spent on a new telecare system to improve the Lifeline service which many of our residents rely on. And the installation of 1,000 call blocker units has stopped 1 million nuisance or scam calls by criminals who often target older people. What has struck me most during my first year in office has been the amount of good work that this council does to improve the lives of people in East Renfrewshire and the dedication of those who do that work. I've been immensely impressed by our staff who go above and beyond on a daily basis to deliver vital services and who proudly demonstrate our council's values of ambition, kindness and trust. As part of the discussions councillors have been having about the budget, our trade union partners spoke to us about their members' priorities, and I thank them for their input. Thanks also to all our staff who have been involved in this extremely challenging and stressful budget process this year. Despite having been able to significantly reduce the size of the budget shortfall for the coming year, we still have to find £4.1 million worth of savings, and in the back of many years of previous savings and cuts, that becomes increasingly difficult. It leaves us with no option but to look at cutting services and jobs. In November, we estimated as many as 550 jobs could be at risk over the next 3 years. Whilst we don't have a clear idea of what our funding position is going to be after 23-24, we can say that fewer than 50 posts may be affected in the year ahead. However, I can give an assurance that there will be no compulsory redundancies linked to this year's savings. Unless funding of local government improves, it is likely jobs and vital council services will continue to be at risk in the years to come. In today's budget, I have outlined the unprecedented financial challenges faced by East Renfrewshire Council. We have had to take very difficult decisions on what savings to make and on increasing council tax, but have closed our budget gap and balanced the books. It is vital that councils receive increased funding to maintain the services which residents rely on. And, as council leader, I will continue to lobby for a better deal. Last week, I wrote to the First Minister to outline my concerns about the severe and far-reaching consequences the local government settlement will have on people here in East Renfrewshire. I also called on the First Minister to recognise the damaging impact of ring-fencing so much of our council budget to deliver national priorities. I have yet to receive a reply. We do all that we can with the resources at our disposal. East Renfrewshire is a well-run council which has rightly earned praise from Audit Scotland, the independent watchdog which keeps check on public bodies. Our council-run schools are the best in the country. We top the recycling charts and we have delivered big savings by becoming more efficient. With so many of our residents left reeling by the cost of living crisis, the Council stepped up to the mark to provide them with financial and other practical support and helped create a network of warm and welcome spaces. In conclusion, we listened seriously to the concerns raised by residents in the budget engagement process. You told us you were prepared to pay a little bit more in council tax so long as vital services are protected, and we have delivered on that. This year, we have saved our grass cutting service, our popular mixed tenure service, which keeps shared areas of flats in good condition, and the recycling centre in Barrhead will stay open. And we have put in significant new capital spending on repairing our roads. In education this year, we have protected teacher numbers, pupil support assistant numbers, and the length of the school week. I am delighted we have not only removed the proposed saving impacting our ASN pupils, but we have also added £60,000 of new investment to support our most vulnerable children with complex needs in Isabel Mare, Calabar Communication Centre and Woollymood. And will work with parents and carers to determine how best to use that money. We will continue to build new schools, with the Nielsen campus next on the list to be delivered. This year, we have also saved campus police officers. All these measures will help give our children the best start in life and keep them safe and ensure East Renfrewshire continues to be a great place to live and raise a family. Despite the very real financial challenges faced by this council, our priorities will continue to be supporting the most vulnerable people in our communities, and I remain optimistic and determined that we will be able to build a better future for all our residents. Thank you. I now formally move the motion which I outlined before the beginning of the speech.
Thank you very much, Councillor O'Donnell. Give you a chance to get that organised. Thank you. Councillor Anderson, would you like to speak in support of the motion that you're now seconding? Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, I would like to second the motion. I do so because this budget delivers the best choices that can be made in the current circumstances for East Renfrewshire. The Labour administration prioritised two clear objectives at the start of the budget process. Firstly, to mitigate against the financial constraints placed on East Renfrewshire Council by the Scottish Government for the next financial year, and secondly, to do so in a manner that would ensure that future budgets have a fiscal platform to build on. These objectives were of equal importance, as decisions made now ensure that other decisions which are more difficult can be made in the next 2 years and will already have a sound basis to build on. I do have to comment here that the use of reserves we regard to be irresponsible, and it is taking an extra £500,000 from reserves is not the right path to follow, and also that it's irresponsible not to prepare now for the following years. As already identified by the leaders of the Council, all the key financial factors which have been taken into account by our budget, and we have also taken the guidance provided by the consultation with East Renfrewshire constituents in regard to their budget priorities. Our constituents made it clear that they wanted to protect certain essential services, and in particular education, and raise council tax if it was required to do so, and this is reflected in our budget. We owe a debt of gratitude to the people of East Renfrewshire. that they have shown a willingness to protect services and the education of our children, as they clearly understand the importance this has for our future. What concerns me most now is the clear conflict that exists in Scotland, and particularly between COSLA and the Scottish Government, and the impact this has on local government. This is a time when we need unity, when we need leadership at all levels of government in Scotland, working together to help people cope with the difficult times that everyone is facing. Instead of this, due to decisions being made with no consultation, COSLA has had no choice but to unite against the Scottish Government, as all councils are facing the same circumstances as ourselves. Indeed, one of our own councillors, Councillor Buchanan, in his role as convener for children and young people at COSLA, made it clear in a recent joint statement that shows the consequences of these decisions in relation to education proposals that are being enforced by the Scottish Government. He said that this is an unnecessary and unwanted attack and intervention on our democratic mandate as elected politicians in our own right. We are seeing potentially unworkable proposals foisted upon us without any prior discussion or consultation with local government, proposals we will be seeking legal advice on. This lack of unity and inability to work together is not what East Renfrewshire or Scotland needs, but unfortunately there is no sign of this ending soon. Sadly, the conflict also extends beyond local government, but still directly affects us. Attempts to reach an agreement with our unions, and in particular within education, are affecting us even today, when our children are not at school where they should be. Again, the process of negotiation with the unions has suffered from a lack of leadership. These negotiations have taken far too long, and without good faith. The Scottish Government, working with COSLA and the unions, must find a resolution as soon as possible that crucially must be fully funded by the Scottish Government, but a final agreement should have been reached quite some time ago. Yet again, though, the impact of this agreement will potentially have a significant impact on local government, as the funding may affect other areas. East Renfrewshire Council is still waiting on the decision that was meant to have been made months ago on LEAP funding for 2 new schools at Carrollside and Crossartley primary schools. A further consequence of the lack of leadership and financial planning from the Scottish Government may result in these schools not being built when they are badly needed. In all of these circumstances that I have highlighted, it is local government and local people that are paying the price for the incompetence and lack of financial management of the Scottish Government. And indeed, the £100 million that's allegedly coming to councils in Scotland, I believe significantly large amounts of it are already earmarked for staff pay. As it is abundantly clear, this budget has been created in very difficult circumstances that are out with our control and not helped by our own government, but it delivers in the areas that were prioritised by this administration and the people of East Renfrewshire, and it has my support. Finally, I would like to acknowledge, and the leader mentioned it also, the significant effort and volume of work that has been completed by the Budget Strategy Group. We are fortunate to have a senior management team that has such a high level of competence and ability that has been applied throughout the budget process, and this has greatly assisted council members in their decision making, and this ultimately benefits the people of East Renfrewshire. So I would just like to express our gratitude and mine even and appreciation of their efforts during this long and arduous process. Thank you to all of the senior management team, to the directors and the heads of service. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you very much, Councillor Anderson. And can I remind colleagues and ask again that when you're using abbreviations, if you could please state what these abbreviations mean. For example, the LEAP funding that you referred to about replacement schools refers to the Learning Estate Improvement Programme. So thanks very much for that.
Apologies, Provost.
Councillor Buchanan, if you would like to speak to the amendment now, please.
Thank you, Provost. It's been an extremely interesting last few minutes listening to much of what has been said. Can I begin by thanking officers for the preparatory work that they have done particularly this year in difficult circumstances, given the unusual circumstance, in particular, that we have of an administration not taking responsibility of a budget early on and waiting to put in recommendations at the last minute. Not something that has ever happened in the past in East Renfrewshire. In terms of ring-fenced budgets and some of the issues that have been mentioned, I agree. As Councillor Anderson quoted me, I have argued with Scottish Government in terms of ring-fencing for many years. I've taken that position that we need greater flexibility, that we need freedoms, something else I've argued about on many occasions, in order to carry out the job that we do and in order to deliver the best outcomes for our residents. And so today, in fact, even before I go in and propose all of my things, I'll touch on, Councillor O'Donnell touched on laterally some of the things that had been done recently in terms of the Neilston campus and in terms of the new nurseries, etc., the work that was done in roads. And I would highlight, obviously, that those are all things that commenced and indeed were commissioned by the last administration and would have been completed but for COVID. But they were all items that are now completed despite the delays and were commissioned by the previous administration. So in actual fact, the credit for that I acknowledge, but it was the previous administration that delivered on all of those items, and in actual fact, this administration hasn't delivered on anything as yet. In terms of, he touched on roads, and yes, the investment there's still a further 3 million of the plan that had been put in place some years ago to improve our roads and is having a significant effect on all of our roads, and we all see the improvements. You don't need to travel too far into the boundaries of many of our neighbours even to see the benefits that have occurred across the authority in the last few years. But I'll also touch on that we are also proposing in our budget to save the roads management work, the work that goes on day in, day out, assisting to repair potholes and such like that, 300,000 that we have put in our proposal today, and will continue to support our environment staff in doing so. We also speak to our residents and of course our trade unions and our staff, and the budget proposals that we have again contain no compulsory redundancies. In fact, we have been able to take out all of the staff cuts just about that were proposed for this year by the proposals that we are putting forward. And I'll start to touch on some of those things. There are clearly some aspects that are in common and we have agreed that should be protected, but we do believe that it can be done in a different manner. We have proposed a 5.5% council tax increase. We know that all of our residents across the authority, that the cost of living crisis is impacting on everyone, and that's an ongoing problem post-pandemic that we are all struggling to deal with. Of course, many of the issues that caused that are out with our control and indeed Scottish Government's control. Much of it is down to the huge inflationary costs, food costs rising by over 17%, etc., are all out with the control either of the Scottish Government and certainly out with the control that we have. But we will manage to take things forward, and we have produced outcomes that we believe are fair and supportive. We all touch on the things that we do well in East Renfrewshire and have done for some time. Hence, we propose that the proposed reduction in other staff groups, excluding teachers, that's to say our bilingual services, it's our assistants in schools, it's our technicians, all of that we have encouraged and will be protected. We will continue with our Dreams Come True weekends, which, as some of us know that have been here a long time, are always a delight to have the children coming in to tell us about the weekends that they have, or the week that they have in the outdoors, with the support from students across all our secondary schools. Fantastic experiences for them, and we will continue to protect that. The reduction in centrally based business support and budget teams. Now, these teams are critical in education because they help all of our teachers and our head teachers get the support that they need to deliver the fantastic outcomes that Councillor Anderson touched on earlier this morning in relation to our schools. And again, our centrally based support posts, which do all of that work behind the scenes, enabling our teachers to teach and get those quality results. Removal of the early intervention and prevention resource to help the continuation of tackling poverty and to ensure that from an early age we support our families and young people, and we will continue to do that in our. And again, the campus officer, police officers, we have had them for a number of years now. They do a fantastic job, and we would if the decision was to remove those, I think it would be tragic. We already see that post-COVID, we see some increases in antisocial behaviour across the area. The campus cops play a vital role in ensuring that those things are picked up quickly, and the delivery of such. They also support our diversionary tactics, and we will continue to support our campus cops in the work that they do. Adult learning, again, a vital part, because without ensuring that adult learning and supporting those with numeracy and literacy issues, no matter their age, are vital in ensuring the outcomes that we have in terms of attainment. Because if the parents are unable to support children, it leads to further issues on an ongoing basis. So it's vital that we continue with those services, helping everyone in our authority achieve those standards. If we then move on to our environment, and I'll touch on some of the issues that have been raised there. There was an initial significant increase of 50,000 in burial charges. Now, not something that everyone wants to think about in advance, but in East Renfrewshire, our charges are already some of the highest in the country. We'd already taken a decision back in October to increase those charges significantly, and I think it's only right that we don't take this additional one and burden people more at one of the most difficult times that many families and individuals are likely to face. The network management for our roads I've already touched on. We continue to support our roads, not just in capital, but on our ongoing costs, and we therefore would remove the £300,000 saving that was there. And again, we've also been good enough to put in £260,000 for the waste charges, given that the Cabinet's decision was to go for £60. It was called in by audit, rightly so, in many respects, but we also took the view that there are some increases which we might need to take in order to protect other services. The reduction of the Cabinet's initial decision of £60 down to £50 means that there's a gap there of approximately £260,000. We are ensuring that we fill that gap rather than take additional costs elsewhere, which may impact on other services and on other staffing issues. Moving on to our business operations and partnership, our customer first team. We need to protect that. They do a fantastic service for us. They are the first point of contact with our residents, with the public, and they have done a fantastic job, particularly during the impact of coronavirus, where they were in the front line dealing with many issues. And I think it's only right that we continue to protect them and the service that they provide. And again, as I touched on earlier, although it was in education, our community learning and development and our staff service reductions, again, what they do across the authority to protect the services and to support people is invaluable in getting the outcomes that we all cherish. Water Direct, a little kind of unknown one that was getting slid in. There are changes to that, and that may actually impact significantly on some families who, many who don't realise just the contact that there is in paying their council tax and their water charges included within that. So that can create a difficulty, and we think it's right that we take that out in terms of savings to ensure that we manage that going forward. That is new, and there may not be a huge impact, but there is a possibility that many, given the current cost of living crisis, will find themselves in difficulty, and we need to ensure that we are able to manage that. The other things that we touched on are in our education technicians, again, play a vital role, freeing up the time, ensuring that our teachers can deliver, and particularly when given that so much of our valued learning during the pandemic was done online, it's vital that we have those technicians to support teachers, many of whom became very competent in presenting and doing the work online to support pupils, but it also gives them the support and backup that they need across our schools to do that. And again, staff reductions in our ICT, we all know, and it's great to see so many here in the chamber today, but hybrid working is still very much something going forward. And our ICT team have done a fantastic job getting us to where we are. But clearly, there is still some work needs to be done, and we need the support there at the background to ensure that that all functions and works as it should. And again, our strategic services staff reductions, again, it's behind the scenes. No one necessarily looks at it, but the work that gets done, again, to deliver on the outcomes of the front-facing areas is vital, and those staff are a crucial part of that. All in all, with the 100,000 that we're creating as an additional support needs wellbeing fund to deal with all of the issues that we have across the authority, our Isabel Mayer School, our Carlaba, all do fantastic work, as do our normal mainstream schools, in working with children with additional support needs. This fund will enable education, HSCP and the respective partners within that to deliver on some of the services that we all want to see and help with the equity across all of our schools and children's services to ensure that we treat everyone the same and give everyone the quality of opportunity that every child deserves. And moving on from that, our total savings reduction is 1.759.1 million. Significantly more than the current administration have proposed. We can deliver that. It has, as was requested, been costed and is deliverable. And of course, we face issues in future years. But we also know that there is a budget, a UK budget, coming up on the 14th of March, followed by a Holyrood budget. And the arguments will be made that local government should be treated better, should get more, a bigger slice of the pie, as Councillor Morrison touched on earlier. But again, that pie also has to increase, because when you look at what is delivered and why our slice of the pie has gone down, because Scottish Government mitigates things like the bedroom tax. We provide funding for child payments. We provide free prescriptions. So all of these areas cost. And yes, maybe there needs to be a review on that. But they are decisions that our respective governments require to take. And I think it's right that we shouldn't jump the gun in implementing cuts prior to knowing and making the arguments that I've no doubt local government will make with our respective government partners to ensure that we get a fair deal. And so, colleagues, I can also say, within the remit of the motion that we have proposed, there are no compulsory redundancies. We listen to our residents, but crucially, we also deliver and have a track record of delivering for our residents over the last number of years, at least 15 that I can recall, in being in the position within the administration. And so, colleagues, I formally move our budget recommendations to you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buchanan. Councillor Bamforth, would you like to speak in seconding the amendment? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Where to start?
There's just no accountability here, is there? East Renfrewshire Council came into existence, as we all know, in 1996. For the first 27 years, administration councillors produced their annual budget. This year, the 28th year, for the first time, this administration hasn't. Their laying responsibility for the budget at the door of officers instead of accepting responsibility. Councillor O'Donnell, you're looking a bit shocked, but you have put a motion forward, not a budget.
Speak through the chair, please, Councillor Bamforth, through the chair. Thank you.
Sorry. Making a speech on your motion is not taking responsibility for the budget decisions, nor is it a good look, as Councillor Buchanan mentioned, taking credit for initiatives started and funded by the previous administration. The Labour administration, and I use the term loosely, are happy to take the power, the convenerships, membership of outside bodies and remunerations attached to that, the senior councillor salaries, and to hand out senior roles and salaries to all but one of the Tory councillors. But they clearly don't want to take responsibility for any of the difficult decisions that are needed. This is also that they can deflect blame, as we've heard, for their own decisions onto the Scottish Government. While we all agree and accept that we would like more funding from the Scottish Government, we need to remember that the Scottish Government funding comes from Westminster via Barnett and the like. And, unlike the UK Government, we have limited borrowing powers. They would have us believe that the funding shortfall to local councils is exclusively a Scottish problem, whereas this issue is affecting all councils, including the ones in Labour-controlled Wales and Tory-controlled England. As Labour's Stephen Kinnock pointed out in BBC Question Time, if any of you watch it, on the 16th of February this year, UK Government funding to councils has been reduced by 39% since 2010. In fact, some English councils have been declared bankrupt, both Labour and Tory-controlled, with dozens more currently on the brink. It's therefore a bit pathetic that the Labour administration, aided and abetted by their Tory paid-for support in this chamber, are trying to blame the Scottish Government purely for this problem, when the issues are underfunding by the UK Government and high interest rates, mainly driven by the appallingly poor mismanagement of the economy by the UK Tory Government, including Liz Truss's disastrous mini-budget, which cost our UK economy £30 billion. Then we have the £200 million spent on Michelle Mone's 3-week-old PPE company, and the £4.5 billion of COVID fraud schemes written off by Rishi Sunak last year, or the £42 billion Brexit divorce bill. I could go on, but imagine how much more money could have been given to local authorities if this money was available, thereby avoiding the £3 billion black hole that now exists and is having to be funded by cuts to councils throughout the UK. Despite limited funding, as Councillor Buchanan has alluded to, Scottish Government have had to fund councils, keep within their budgets, and also spend £594 million to mitigate things such as the bedroom tax, the rape clause, and fund initiatives such as the Scottish Child Payment, while still balancing the books. As a result, Scotland's poverty rate is 22% lower than in England, according to the report issued within the last week or two by the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. So clearly they're doing something right. The budget proposals we have put forward, whilst balancing the books, supports our most vulnerable in our area, and we have sought to remove the most brutal of cuts, protecting education, including teachers and PSA numbers, keeping our valuable library assistants, school crossing patrollers, adult learning and psychological services. We've also proposed an extra £100,000 for our most vulnerable children, supporting their health and well-being. We wish to support campus cops in our schools, who support and enhance the health, safety and well-being of our young people. All the decisions we've made this year follow the example we set over the past 15 years when we were in a shared administration, which Labour seems to have conveniently forgotten about. This vision resulted in East End services being the envy of other local authorities. As in respect of educational attainment, support for our young people, as well as having the lowest crime rate in mainland Scotland. This is the result of prudent fiscal decisions made over the years, guided by our excellent East Renfrewshire Council's accountancy team, Margaret and Barbara and their staff, and the vision to do what was best for residents and not playing silly political games like the new administration and their Tory chums are currently engaging in. The main losers here are East Renfrewshire residents, sadly. Who will lose? Library assistants. The roads budget cut by 300,000. Job losses now and in the future. Removal of £135,000 early intervention and prevention resources, thereby hitting our most vulnerable. Shame on you, Labour and the Tories for doing this deal that they've clearly already done, because we notice there's no Tory amendments here. Well, we expect this from the Tories, let's face it. Really, Labour? Councillor Anderson mentioned collaboration in the Council. Can I remind him that SNP and Labour were in a successful coalition for 15 years. They chose this route. They chose this time to work with the Tories, and look at the result. Thank you.
So, we have the motion and the amendment both duly proposed, seconded and spoken to. So I will now open it up to other colleagues, and there is a limit of 5 minutes. So if you could indicate who would like to speak. Councillor Wallace, I see your hand is up.
Thank you, Provost. Yeah, I've been listening to the motion and the amendment. First, I would just like to thank the Leader for introducing the administration motion to Council. The initial proposals to retain council tax to 5% was welcome, but certainly not at the cost of key council services. I do recall when he first invited all parties to join the budget strategy group, I felt it was perhaps something of a PR exercise, but experience has suggested not so. We entered into the discussions with a mindset of responsible opposition, and the administration motion clearly shows that concerns we voiced have been listened to. The council tax increase has been kept below the UK earnings growth, and the motion of 6%, it is necessary to protect education, and in particular our most vulnerable pupils. We now have new investment to support our pupils at Isabel Mayer, replacing that previously removed by the SNP administration, I seem to recall. School librarian services will be retained, CCTV maintained and help tackle crime. £3.5 million per year additional investment in the roads, and not forgetting the garden waste, with an increase now retained or restrained, should I say, to offset the known increase in costs, but without abusing the goodwill and support of those who purchase the permits. If there is any criticism of the administration motion or the way it was delivered, it's perhaps for the considerable restraint shown by the Leader on where the blame lies for the cuts. It was interesting to hear the query from an SNP councillor on the progress of commercialisation projects in the council earlier on in this meeting, but I certainly hope they do not reflect the commercialisation efforts of the SNP Scottish Government, who, with an estimated 60 billion asset for our wind farms being sold off for less than 1 billion. Extraordinary. But we are where we are. But perhaps a key concern I got with the amendment is that it insists that officers get permission from the council to review the running of services. Permission to do the job that East Renfrewshire residents pay them to do in the first place. I think the other thing is that the administration motion appears to make many of the savings reflected in the original motion or in the amendment, but without squandering the one-off benefits that we are going to get from this fiscal flexibility. That is that the amendment retains these funds to help offset the pressures that we know are ahead of us. Sorry, I've said the amendment. The motion is put forward that we will retain much of these fiscal flexibility for future years, which is responsible budgeting. That the motion retains the council tax increase to 6% with the associated benefits accrued is commendable, and I would thank the officers for their participation in the budget process, and they may be assured that we've got no concerns over them doing the job they are employed to do. And taking all these factors in consideration, I'm minded to support the motion. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wallace, and thank you for being brief in your comments to Councillor Morrison.
Thank you very much, Provost. Can I just say the administration were urged by the Conservative group and, of course, Independent Councillor David MacDonald to reconsider the 50% increase in the garden waste permit charges, which will equate to Glasgow City Council's new charge at £50 per bin. As a result, and I welcome the consensus that we have across the Chamber on that today. I'm considering the two budgets before us today. I welcome the fact the administration's budget proposal lays the groundwork to maintain the services which the residents value, not just for the coming year, but lays the groundwork for the future years to come. Because at the very start of the budget strategy group process, it was very clear that we were looking at a settlement for the next 3 years. This will help maintain high standards within our schools, whilst offering as much restraint as possible in the circumstances on council tax. This compares to an SNP amendment, which seeks to replace services they cut just last year, such as services for additional support needs pupils, to be paid for in this amendment on the never with no sustainable long-term plan for the years ahead. Now, I know Councillor Buchanan made many references to his previous administration in his contribution earlier, so let's make another one. This time last year, the last SNP administration Councillor Buchanan led cut £62,000 on the extended school year service at Isabel Mere School. And now this year, the SNP wish to increase spending for ASN pupils by £100,000. It's clear the SNP are a party which say one thing in administration and another in opposition. The council tax increase today is solely the fault of our direct paymasters, the Scottish Government. Despite the SNP benefiting from a larger budget from the UK Government, they have not given East Renfrewshire Council enough funding to provide all of the services we would like against a backdrop of pay pressures and inflation. They have instead squandered hundreds of millions of pounds of taxpayers' money on services such as the Fair and Ferry contracts and botched bailouts in the private sector such as BIFAB, Prestwick Airport and other national projects to which the Auditor General has criticised as having poor public return on investment. Now, the Conservative group lobbied to protect the vital education services as set out just there by Councillor Gordon Wallace, all to ensure every child can benefit from the excellent education standards available in all of East Renfrewshire schools. This will of course help bridge the attainment gap which sadly persists after 16 years of SNP government. It's a matter of regret, 4 months on from this chamber approving the Learning Estate Improvement Programme bids for new schools for Cross Athley and Carrollside, that we are still waiting for a response from the Scottish Government, but I'm delighted to see that both are provided for within the administration's capital plan, and further welcome the £3 million a year for the next 5 years, which will help upgrade our roads and keep those in good condition, as I'm very mindful that that is a concern our residents always have. Unless the Scottish Government change direction dramatically, and the closed-door SNP leadership contest so far does not offer any promise in this regard, East Renfrewshire Council's financial circumstances for the year after this continues to look challenging. It's clear decisions taken now will make future years slightly easier to deal with, but the primary levers of power to avoid further cuts and council tax hikes lie with our direct paymasters, the Scottish Government. This is sadly, in conclusion, not a Conservative budget. I am convinced there are more savings and efficiencies which could be obtained whilst maintaining frontline services. However, compromise is necessary in a situation of minority government. I offer my support to the minority administration today to ensure the Council can meet its legal obligations and deliver a balanced budget, and to discharge my duties in a mature, responsible manner as our residents expect us to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Morrison. I would ask for respect from other councillors when people are speaking. Are there any other contributors indicating they would wish to speak? Councillor Ireland.
Thank you very much, Provost. Just before I start, Councillor Wallace spoke there, but he got something quite spectacularly wrong. The two budgets that we're looking at, or the two amendments to a budget that was the officers, the library service in our schools will not be saved, Councillor Wallace. That is not saved in this Labour amendment. And that's deeply, deeply concerning, because if you're voting with them, you're cutting that service. And I wanted to say that at the outset, because that's something that's deeply, deeply personal and important to me. But it's just a correction for you that you said it's saved. It's most certainly not saved. I just wanted you to know that. That's disappointing. Talking about disappointing, the Labour group never failed to disappoint, do they? They previously, with enthusiasm and some obvious glee at the time, if I remember, formed a minority administration which was entirely reliant on Conservative votes. They immediately gave the vast amount of those, the vast majority of those Tory councillors, an extra £5,000 to secure those votes. They voted with the Tories at least 46 times over the past 10 months, and have voted against really important motions that we've put forward just because they were voting together. This was one was to place defibrillators at all of our schools, mark International Workers' Day, which was put off to some other committee, which, as far as I'm aware, has never met from that day till now. And voted down our cost of living motion.
Councillor Ireland, I take it you're going to address the amendment concerning a budget?
Oh, absolutely. I think some other folk had points they wanted to make as well. Since last May, Labour have worked really hard to pretend that they're not in a very evident partnership with the Tories. The Tories, for their part, have worked really, really hard, and they're working hard today, by the way, doing this to pretend that they're essentially not just doing the bidding of Anas Sarwar. Well done, you. Labour have then pretended that the money they pay for the majority of the Tories is just a coincidence, and is absolutely not payment for votes in any way, shape or form. And here, East Renfrewshire Labour are pretending that the budget papers that we got out on Friday are not their own, that they have their own amendment to their own budget. It's nothing to do with them, and especially they fought tooth and nail, and as I said, with glee and relish, joined in with the Tories to become the administration which sets the budget, but then they don't want to own the budget. And they put an amendment into their own budget. It's an absolute farce. Now, I'm disappointed, but unfortunately absolutely not surprised by some of the comments from Labour and the Tories in the Chamber today about the Scottish Government. Seriously, let's not kid ourselves. That just attacking and blaming the Scottish Government, which itself has a very fixed budget, which has been continuously cut with the Tories since they came to power in 2010, is actually a solution. Tory-driven inflation means that the Scottish Government's annual budget is now worth £1.7 billion less than when it was published last December. At the same time, demand for government support and intervention is understandably increasing. The Scottish Government spends almost £600 million a year, mitigating the current spending crisis and horrendous immoral Tory policies. But, you know, here they come today to lay the blame on the Scottish Government, while Labour are simultaneously refusing to take responsibility for their own budget, and an enthusiastic, as we have seen, partnership with the Tories after what the Tories have done to the economy is beyond belief. As a group, the SNP in East Renfrewshire have always protected jobs and frontline services for our residents. We will continue to work hard in our amendment here today to protect these, despite currently sitting in opposition against Labour and the Tories. Our SNP amendment continues to ensure that those services which are most important to local residents are safeguarded, and doing that for a lower level of council tax than the Labour and the Conservatives are willing to charge local residents. It ensures that our pupil support staff are protected. An administration cut which alone would have reduced this support to pupils by 66% and would have had an enormous impact on children's educational outcomes. Our budget will protect our much needed school libraries. They're not going to be, the librarians are going to be taken away because of this. Our bilingual support workers, they're being cut. School-based technicians, we're supporting these. If Labour cut is taken, this saving will impact on the quality and variety of learning for all pupils. We have removed the administration cut to Dreams Come True, Specialist Therapies and Chaos Club, and instead of cutting, we've added an additional 100,000 for children with additional support needs. Our budget continues to fund the Adult Learning Service. Our essential campus police officers, whose removal could result in an increase in offending and antisocial behaviour.
Finish up now, Councillor Ireland, that's time.
Budget decisions taken today are essentially all about priorities and what's important to us. Our SNP amendment sets out our SNP priorities to protect jobs and frontline services, our children and our young people's education, our roads and our libraries. I don't know how the Labour councillors here today can possibly continue to align themselves with the Tories in the Chamber. That is, if the Tories, as it's looking like today, support them, because what they are doing by that is voting for higher council tax, cutting our school library service, our school technicians, cutting adult learning, and additional
now, Councillor Ireland, thank you. Councillor Lundy, Councillor Ireland, that's you finished. It's 5 minutes. Damon has timed you, so you have to stop now. Councillor Lundy.
I'd like to speak in support of our amendment. Councillor O'Donnell said this was the best budget that could be offered under the circumstances. I beg to differ. I think our amendment is better. We are coming in with a rate of council tax at less, at 5.5%. There's a difference of £1 million there or thereabouts in savings. And for a point of clarity, I think the librarian cut falls within education 2.3, which is a reduction in other staff groups, and our amendment is the amendment that saves this. Also in that reduction is the removal of bilingual support workers, school-based technicians, school-based business support staff, and it's said within the papers that this savings could impact the quality and variety of learning and experiences for pupils, the attainment, achievement and well-being of English as an additional language learners and affect learners. And this could also affect learners who are not academic but learn differently through the cuts to technicians. We've also got the creation of the additional support needs wellbeing fund, which is putting £100,000 into the most vulnerable people and pupils, and quite rightly all of us have probably had emails about Isabel Mayer School, and I think this is the way forward in terms of addressing issues there. As Councillor Buchanan raised, the SNP amendment would take away the increases to burial charges, would also ensure that there was no compulsory redundancies, and I'm not really sure how the Labour group are going to manage that one with the removal of services, but you know, that's up to them. Bizarrely, the council leader boasted about protecting teachers and PSA numbers, yet chastised the Scottish Government for providing the funding to protect teacher numbers and PSA numbers. You know, if we do not ring-fence this money, where is the money coming from, and what services would you choose to cut? So I think that's all I have to say, actually.
Thank you, Councillor Lundy, for being brief. Thank you for that. Councillor Merrick.
Thank you, Provost. I won't take the full 5 minutes, but I will have a wee bit of preamble because some of the stuff I've heard has to be addressed, I think. So first of all, thanks to the officers for preparing the budget. I'm speaking to colleagues, residents of East Renfrewshire, members of the public, and anybody who might happen to be watching at home. I don't know if there are yet, okay, but welcome. So, the administration of your East Renfrewshire Council was annexed by Councillor O'Donnell at the behest of his party leader, whose name, incidentally, did not appear on a single ballot paper ever in East Renfrewshire. Don't just take my word for it, take Councillor O'Donnell's word for it when he spoke just after the election. However, what Councillor O'Donnell forgot, what he completely forgot to do, was to shoulder the responsibility of being in administration, the responsibility of leadership of a Scottish local authority, and to prepare a budget, not a motion, not to put all the responsibility onto the officers, to take responsibility yourself. Only a group that doesn't understand what the campus police do would leave that up there to begin with. It should never have been there. We both rejected that. Everybody knows that. Only somebody who doesn't understand what the other staff groups do, maybe it's just the word other, in schools, who thinks that they're protecting school librarians, when in fact they're not. You've cut them. Your savings are more than £1 million of what our savings are. And you say no compulsory redundancies. I don't believe you. We'll watch that one closely, and I think the unions should keep on top of that. And to protect jobs, just to some of the words that Councillor Wallace came up with, that's not squandering money. Okay, so also some of the discussion we heard there, you would think that we hadn't had a decade of UK Tory government with the chronic underfunding across the entire UK that's gone on. You'd think that Liz Truss hadn't rolled the dice. You'd think the Scottish Government had borrowing powers, that the majority of our residents don't quite like this idea of free tuition fees. I wonder how that would affect the positive destinations when that gets removed, if and when that gets removed. I do commend our budget. I've got 2 laptops and a few bits of paper here, so I am gathering these together. I do commend our budget because it is a fair, socially democratic budget, the type that we've been used to over the previous 5 years. And we've taken responsibility, we've spent a lot of time going through hard options. We would all like more money and to be able to save more things, but we're all stuck with what we have to deal with. But we have to take responsibility for it when we're there too. And you will see coming up next week how the councils across the UK react to the situation. This isn't like Councillor O'Donnell's rhetoric, which is almost like sort of a wee girl did it and ran away. No, that's not the entire true case, and you should take responsibility. That's the end. I commend our budget, which is a far better budget than the lot.
Thank you, Councillor Merrick. Councillor Pragnell.
Thank you, Provost. I think some others members have their microphones on. Councillor Merrick, I think.
Merrick, could you put your microphone off, please? Thanks, Councillor Pragnell.
Thank you, Provost. I will be supporting the Labour Minority Administration motion and budget today. This is the most challenging year for East Renfrewshire and all councils throughout Scotland due to the SNP government's chronic underfunding of local government. I came into politics to enhance vital services and to improve the living standards of the people of East Renfrewshire. I did not expect to have to produce a budget that merely struggles to sustain the status quo. As an administration, our hands have been tied by an incompetent Scottish Government who don't value local government. This is shown by the fact that when the SNP government came to power, local government received 33% of the block grant funding from Westminster. and now receives only 24%. What happened to that 9% shortfall? This is a question that the SNP government must answer. Under Scottish Labour governments, local government was valued and funded accordingly. As a council, our share of the Scottish Government grant settlement does not take into account the growing population of East Renfrewshire. If it did, we would have received an additional £4.2 million in funding. Even without this addition, taking into account inflation, we should have received an additional £22 million. Instead, we received merely £1.5 million. This is clearly a political decision by a Scottish Government who wants to undermine local authorities. We are still expected to deliver the same services with less funding. This is not helped by the Scottish Government's obsession with ring fencing and centralisation. The desire for populist policies with no additional funding continues to pull in the resources available for vital services. I remember the 2007 SNP election promise to reform council tax. 16 years later and nothing. Instead, the freeze on council tax for over 10 years further contributed to the underfunding of local government, leaving us in a situation where, without using reserves, we would have to increase council tax by 50% just to maintain the status quo for 2022-2023 levels of service. It's time the SNP government stopped its obsession with centralisation and allowed local government and COSLA to make relevant decisions for our residents. We are the people on the ground who understand the unique circumstances of locality. We know how bad things are when even the SNP councillors are taking a stand against government cuts. To quote Councillor Tony Buchanan, "This is an unnecessary and unwanted attack on our democratic mandate as elected politicians. The impact of government proposals across our services will result in cuts, job losses having to be taken from already pressed essential services like roads, libraries and waste." As Councillor Buchanan points out, this infringement on local democracy affects not only services but the livelihoods of council staff, with the prospects of job cuts. This is why our budget today commits to no compulsory redundancies. Here in East Renfrewshire, our council officers and staff are committed to serving the people and ensuring the delivery of services. I commend them for their hard work. I commend our budget, which seeks to mitigate against cuts to vital services. In East Renfrewshire, we are already leading the way with our commitment of £4.4 million to mitigate the cost of living crisis, which has been extended to next winter. We wrote off school meal debt before COSLA proposed this. We are providing £60,000 worth of additional funds for children with additional support needs in our school. This Labour budget will make a positive difference to the lives of our residents. If a Labour council administration can make such a difference, think of the difference the future Scottish Labour government will make across Scotland. I ask you to support this budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pragno, and also for within time. Anybody else? Okay. Anybody online? So it looks as if we have. Oh, Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Provost. I just wanted to briefly mention a couple of things. Initially, when I made the decision, after numerous discussions, to assist in putting Councillor O'Donnell and the Labour group into administration, I did so after a great deal of consideration of all the options that were there, or in this case, were not there. And I did so at the time with reservations that such a minority administration would be a weak position and would be fraught with quite a lot of difficulty going forward. But I gave them the benefit of the doubt, given the few options that were on the table. And what I would say to Councillor O'Donnell is, you're in your first year of 5 what will be very long years in trying to get these kind of budget motions over the line. And you find yourself in a very uncomfortable position, because realistically, East Renfrewshire Council, in terms of its electoral makeup, and the groupings within this council is not operating in what I would determine to be a healthy manner. What do I mean by that? Well, ultimately we have opposition with the SNP group and the Conservative group, and I don't think any of us in the room can be under any surprises that the Conservatives and the SNP will not naturally work together. But we also have an administration now that is ultimately going to, on occasion, have to rely on Conservative votes to get its manifesto over the line. Which, if you look at it on the manifestos between Labour and SNP groups historically within East Renfrewshire Council, there hasn't been too much different between them, apart from the larger constitutional question about an independent Scotland. And historically, they've actually worked quite well with one another. Certainly in the last administration, they seemed to. I sat in opposition, but I was cognizant of the fact that they worked well with one another. We have a situation now where things have become quite tribal, and I'm quite astonished actually that we have a Conservative group now, and this is just the reality of the situation that we find ourselves in. We have a Conservative group now who refuse to put and table their own amendment at a budget meeting, which is, if you think about it, quite astonishing. And I think a lot of Conservative voters out there will be largely disappointed that it appears now that the Conservative group are going to be shuffling behind Labour on every single occasion, just to simply keep the SNP out of power. I find that quite, without taking a political view on the overall issues that separate the parties, I find that to be quite an extraordinary situation. We also have, and this isn't taking anything away from the fact that I have a tremendous amount of professional respect for Councillor Morrison, but we also have the Chair of Audit and Scrutiny Committee, whose very job it is, and I understand it's a separate committee that is non-political, but we have a rather extraordinary situation where we have the Chair of the Audit and Scrutiny Committee, a member of the Conservative group, who is now effectively rubber stamping a Labour motion to get it over the line. It's extraordinary. So what I would say to Councillor O'Donnell is, my feeling for the health and well-being of this council within the electoral chamber that we all sit within is, going forward, Councillor O'Donnell, you need to now go back to the SNP group and you need to be grown up about this, and we need to have a constructive conversation amongst elected members of both the SNP and the Labour administration to be able to look at negotiating a future that is going to be constructive for the future of East Renfrewshire. And that will also play into the fact that it will be a much healthier opposition as well. I think we need some moment of clarity.
Point of order, Provost.
Point of order, Councillor Morrison.
Is there any provision within the standing orders that a member participating in a debate actually makes the contribution relevant to the matter which is being discussed? Because I'm not hearing it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Morrison. Councillor MacDonald is entitled to make his own views known about the budget, but I think it's he's stated that this is about people working together. I'm assuming that I take it from what Councillor MacDonald says so far, it's about people working together. And my comments at the beginning of the meeting was similar about that, people working for the best interests of the local community. So my understanding is that is what Councillor MacDonald is also proposing, and correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor MacDonald. So sorry to interrupt your time, but Eamon is taking account of your time. So how many seconds?
30 seconds.
30 seconds of your speech left, so don't worry, it's not about the referee. We stop the clock and you've got 30 seconds left. Not injury time.
As I say in US Congress, I reclaim my time. So what I would say is to Councillor Morrison, naturally I understand he would be upset by me highlighting that. I get that, and I don't take any personal offence to it. What I would say is, going forward, is I really do feel that we have to think about the longevity of this council term and how this is going to play out over the next 4 years of this particular term, because quite frankly, I can only imagine how uncomfortable certain members that sit within certain groups are feeling right now.
Councillor MacDonald, time's up. Thank you very much for your contribution. And I don't see any indications from... Councillor Edlin.
Provost, I was not intending to speak this morning because I didn't think before it would be necessary, but I'd like to remind colleagues here today that we are here to serve our residents and the people that vote for us. And I'm reminded of the comment by Neil Kinnock, a Labour leader, who once said, "You cannot play at politics with people's lives." And people are suffering here, and some of this debate has degenerated into a bun fight that you see in schools, and it's wrong. We are here for a responsible purpose, so I'm going to be very brief. I'm going to say it very quickly. I commend the leader for his efforts in working together within this council and for producing a credible budget. I thank the SNP for letting me know that I have voted 46 times with the Labour administration. It was 43 the last time. I am proud for the collaborative efforts that we are making, and I and my colleagues will take a responsible position and support the people of East Renfrewshire in their difficulties. And I would suggest that before people oppose motions, they should think very carefully about what they're saying and try and look credible to the people who are going to be watching this, because people are suffering and they deserve the best from us, not childish behaviour in the chamber.
Thank you, Councillor Edlin. All those entitled to speak have now spoken.
Point of order, Chair.
Point of order, Councillor.
Yeah, it's just it's a point of clarification, really, that was touched on a couple of times. Initially by Councillor Wallace and kind of acknowledged by Councillor O'Donnell when he nodded towards it. And it's in relation to the Education Saving 2.3, as has been mentioned, and it's the reduction in staff groups other than teachers, pupil support assistants based in the early learning centres. And that includes our school librarians, school-based technicians, etc., ELC staff. Can I confirm that that is not protected in Labour's motion, but is protected in mine, the SNP motion? The total amount saved is 211,000, and it's not included in the motion that Councillor O'Donnell put forward.
I'll ask Councillor O'Donnell to respond to that aspect of it. Do you want to include it in your summing up?
Yeah, I was happy to pick it up in the summing up.
Okay, is that all right? Sorry, you've raised it as a point of order. I'll ask Councillor O'Donnell to address that, and then it will go to summing up.
Okay, so as far as item 2.2 is 2.3 is concerned, this saving is not the complete removal of school librarians, bilingual assistants, and technicians. This is a voluntary redundancy programme which would affect all of those areas. So it could be between all of them could take it or none of them could take it. We are assuming on average it will be half. So depending on what the school librarian's own personal choice in the matter is, that can be saved or partially secured. The intention behind all three services is that they will be redesigned and retained but at a lower level than current. So those services we fully expect at the end of the consultation period to be retained, but at a lower level.
They're not protected then, and they're not costing.
I think I've been very clear. They will be retained, but at a lower level. I've been very clear that those savings is not the entirety of the costs of those services. It's partial cost of those services, and that will be subject to the consultation process and whether they choose to stay with us or not.
Okay, the administration's proposals are on the table. I'm now going to move to Councillor Donald to sum up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Provost. There's quite a bit to go through in this, so hopefully you'll give me a little bit of patience to go through the individual comments that have come from members. Firstly, Councillor Anderson noted that we are not the only ones that are talking about unfair funding for Scottish Government. It is COSLA-wide, it is all 32 councils, and Councillor Buchanan has been part of that campaign. Moving on to Councillor Buchanan, I think there's a confusion within all of the SNP groups, so this will deal with this issue in terms of budgets and responsibility and motions and amendments. You should be aware that most other councils that have minority administrations, each of those administrations are preparing amendments to budgets. That's what we've operated here under advice from the council officers. We are not absconding responsibility, far from it. So we are following due process as advised by officers, and there's no question of not taking responsibility. In terms of the track record, I would remind Councillor Buchanan that Labour has been part of this council's administration since its creation in 1996, and Labour has had an education convener throughout all of that period when we've seen great success in our schools. To say that Labour cannot take credit is just not credible. If I move on to Councillor Bamford on the issue of taking responsibility, again comes up again. Labour, this minority administration, is taking responsibility. We are standing up to the plate and we are planning for the future. SNP are only managing for headlines, not for the benefits of the people of East Renfrewshire. If I go on to Councillor Wallace, again he talked about responsibility in budgeting, and I thank him for his comments on that. Councillor Morrison discussed the bin charges consensus. Consensus can apply in this council. We've done it many times before. There's no reason that that can't carry on again. And he also reflected on the total Scottish Government increase, budget increasing, but the local government share reducing over time, which is a significant issue and reinforces the points being made by COSLA. He also talked about the attainment gap protection and the education services that being protected. You will be aware of the earlier versions of the budget strategy group. There was funding there for attainment gap as savings. We had no intention of delivering on that, and we would have reversed it, and that's what's reflected in our budget today. Councillor Morrison also mentioned the disappointment on the LEAP, and I'm not going to even pretend to remember what that stands for, funding for our schools, and we have recognised that in the budget, in the capital budget. We are determined to provide the best environment for our pupils going forward. And to be fair to Councillor Morrison, he also said that there may be other savings to be made in efficiencies, but those have not been tabled as of yet. Councillor Ireland, and there was this whole confusion about librarians and what's in and what's not. As I've said through all of you, these will be consulted. This is voluntary. The complete intention behind the savings is to redesign the service and maintain a service for our pupils. Ultimately, the decision will be dependent on those individuals, whether they want to continue in the service or not. I don't take too kindly to the allegations, which it seemed like, of buying votes. I'm not sure if that's entirely in breach of the Code of Conduct or not. As again, Council Ireland had a misunderstanding of the budget setting process and the guidance from officers. And she also got wrong her comment on dreams come true. We had that as a budget saving reversal as well as the SNP. Again, Councillor Lundy got a mistake on the librarians and media technicians, and I've addressed the point that he made on teachers and PSAs. Councillor Merrick talked about responsibility. I've addressed that earlier. We fully stand up to the podium on this, and will work responsibly for the people of East Renfrewshire. And again, just to be clear, we have also saved campus officers, just as is within your motion. And again, the comment on no compulsory redundancies, we have stated that that is stated for this year. Thanks for the vote of confidence on that one, but that's up for you to have doubts on that. But that is certainly not the position we're in. There will be no compulsory redundancies related to this year's savings, and I'm very pleased that we believe we've got a plan to be able to deliver on that. Councillor Pragnell also identified the grant settlement reducing over time to local governments and the unfairness of that, and the centralisation mantra of the SNP government and their impact on ring fencing. And also highlighted the quote which was mentioned a couple of times from Councillor Buchanan, the unnecessary and unwarranted attack on local government, which I agree with. Councillor Pragnell also highlighted the £4.4 million cost of living crisis funding, which we've done, and it's going to be extended into next year, and that's a very important direct benefit to the most vulnerable people in East Renfrewshire. Councillor MacDonald, I think his comments on groups not operating in a healthy manner is completely valid. I do agree with him on that. And I would say and remind all people here that the SNP group were offered to talk to us about budget proposals, but they withdrew from the budget strategy group, and they did not want to talk about any of their proposals with us. I would ask them to look at themselves and see how best that they can work with us. The offer has been there since the end of May. It remains there. It is time for you, for this group, to stand up to the mark. And as Councillor Edlin finalised with, we are here to serve all our residents. We're not here to serve individual party political purposes. That is what our residents want. In terms of the amendment, the SNP amendment, it's actually similar in a lot of ways to ours. And it is a pity the SNP group did not engage with the administration to try to run through these. There may well have been compromise possible across all three groups. No, I would note they are taking a short-term view of the financial pressures facing this council by utilising more of the fiscal flexibilities in the current year, and by counting on money specifically ring-fenced for pay awards that is at huge risk of not being enough to pay for the pay to pay our workers. This is reckless and irresponsible and does our workers no favours. They are looking for short-term headlines rather than securing the long-term future of this council and for the services that our residents deserve. More short-termism can be seen by the deferral of all Year 2 savings on the hope only, of more money from the Scottish and UK governments with the budgets in March. This is manana politics, typical of the SNP, promised the world and failed to deliver. This administration have listened seriously to the concerns raised by our residents during the budget engagement process. We are standing up to the mark. They told us they were prepared to pay a little bit more in council tax services as long as we protected the vital services that are important to them, and we have delivered on that. In environment, we say grass cutting, mixed tenure and recycling. In education, we protected teacher numbers, protected pupil support assistant numbers, and protected the length of the school day. We have reversed some of the savings that would have impacted ASM pupils. In addition, we have also created a new investment of £60,000 to support our most vulnerable children with complex needs. But we won't leave this to officers alone. We will work with parents to determine how best to use that money through participatory budgeting. We continue to look to the future and invest in new schools and roads. We have not looked at the budget in 1 year in isolation, which the SNPs clearly have in their motion. We've been mindful of the serious financial challenges in the following years and have prudently used our reserves to help take the edge of the worst of the cuts, not just in this year, but in the following 2 years. I would urge all members to join with me to continue to lobby the Scottish Government for fairer funding in the months ahead. Our residents deserve this. Our budget battles are far from over. This is what our residents expect. A prudent, measured and considered budget that protects their services for both the short and medium term as best we can, and that is what we have delivered. I welcome all members to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor O'Donnell. I'll now hand over to Eamon to do the usual with the roll call vote, given that we have people online.
Thank you, Provost. The motion before the Council today, as proposed by Councillor O'Donnell and seconded by Councillor Ireland, is the one which has been circulated to you. Similarly, the amendment proposed by Councillor Buchanan, seconded by Councillor Bamforth, is the one that again has been circulated. I'll call out the names in alphabetical order, and if people could indicate whether or not they're voting for the motion or the amendment, they could of course indicate that they're choosing to abstain if that's the case. So starting with Councillor Anderson.
Motion.
Councillor Bamforth.
Amendment.
Councillor Buchanan.
Amendment that actually clarifies the discussion that we've just had, unlike Councillor O'Donnell's.
Councillor Campbell.
Motion.
Councillor Convery.
Amendment.
Councillor Cunningham. It's motion for Councillor Cunningham. Councillor Devlin.
Motion.
Councillor Edlin.
Motion.
Councillor Ireland.
Amendment.
Councillor Lundy.
Amendment.
Councillor MacDonald.
Amendment.
Councillor McLean.
Motion.
Councillor Merrick.
Amendment.
Provost Montague.
Motion.
Councillor Morrison.
Motion.
Councillor O'Donnell.
Motion.
Councillor Pragnell.
Motion.
Councillor Wallace.
Motion.
Apologies for the delay. Just when you mentioned motion at the end, Councillor Buchanan, I had put you in the wrong column there.
That's consensus.
So the result of the vote is 11 for the motion and 7 for the amendment. So the motion has been declared carried, Provost.
Thank you very much, Eamon. So we will now adjourn for lunch. If you could be back for 2:10 please. Thank you. Just close this part of the meeting. Thanks. So welcome back, everybody, to the next and hopefully final session of today's agenda. So we're on now to item 15, which is the capital investment strategy. So are there any questions, comments on the report? This is the capital investment strategy. Councillor Ireland.
Thank you very much, Provost. I touched on this earlier, but I was told that to bring it up under the capital investment strategy. It was the question, but I think we don't have Anthony McCreevy now. It was based...
Councillor Ireland, just take some advice from Eamon. I thought it was to your point, your clarification was under the capital plan, but can we just clarify that? So no, it's
apologies,
right.
I'll ask that in the next paper.
No, it's
Thank
not
you
right.
very
We'll
much.
just get it clarified. Just
Thank you.
Hold on a minute. So back to item 15, the capital investment strategy, and Margaret McCrossan, the head of accountancy, is able to answer any questions or points if anybody has any on this. Are there any questions or points or comments? There's nobody indicating. Councillor O'Donnell.
I'd just like to commend Margaret and the team for bringing this paper together. It's really comprehensive, and it shows the complexity of the planning framework that we've got. There's a lot of competing parts in this, and I think you've encapsulated that really well and very, very helpful. So I'd just like to thank Margaret for preparing this report.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I, before I do anything else, can I clarify, is Councillor Wallace still online? I don't see him there. Have we lost him, or is he? But anyway, while that is being dealt with to address this, the report is seeking approval of the capital investment strategy, which covers the long-term capital ambitions of the Council, together with the Treasury Management Strategy report. The report provides background information on the scale, objectives, affordability and risks associated with the Council's capital plan. Can we agree? Agreed. Thank you. And now moving on to item 16, which is General Fund Capital Plan. And I'll open it up for questions or comments. And Councillor Ireland, you first.
Thank you very much, Provost. It was just to touch on what I was talking about in one of the earlier papers. I noted, it was when I saw the Cabinet paper of the 23rd of February, which was talking about a different development. But what caught my eye was that it says, as has been noted in previous reports, construction costs are rising faster than general inflation due to shortages of material and labour, and bidders are factoring in additional risk in their pricing. Across Scotland, many authorities are reporting costs increasing from 20% to 50% on some projects. And there's a Cabinet paper coming tomorrow which again highlights that cost increases of between 20 to 50%. There's a change on the capital plan, I imagine, from our previous full council, because the decision was taken by the administration to delay the start of the Eastwood Leisure Centre, and at that time it was reported that there would be a 2-year delay would add an additional 13.8% project costs at that time, which is well below 20 to 50, and that was estimated around about circa 7 million. So after I read the 20 to 50, my question on this is, does that 7 million still stand, or has it increased in line with the 20 to 50% that's now being reported? Thank you.
I'll start and then pass to Margaret. The figure that's been left in the capital plan for the moment is 55 million, which was the figure that has been in for a length of time. And one of my colleagues, either Margaret or Phil Dawes, who's online, my understanding is the estimate for the smaller scheme, option 2, was actually 52 million, a little less than that. Yeah, so would have been 52 million. There is a great deal of uncertainty about construction inflation. So my understanding is it's been left at 55 million, but before construction starts, there would be, once it had been redesigned and construction starts, it would come back to council with the new cost as part of the capital plan if there needed to be an increase in the 55. There's a lot of uncertainty in construction inflation. So commentators are saying within a while, they expect construction inflation to decrease. Unfortunately, they don't expect it to start to go back to where it was. We won't go into a lower price, but the rate of increase will slow down. So there's an awful lot of uncertainty there. So and Margaret can confirm that, so the decision was made based on the last council decision just to keep it 55 million for the moment and review in a period of time. Margaret, have I got that right?
Yes, that's right. And I can just confirm that as recently as last week, the Corporate Asset Management Group, who monitor inflation and all other things that are impacting on capital, there was no further indication that things were getting any worse, and indeed that we're expecting that things start to, the inflation pressure just begins to reduce a bit. But as yet, there were no red flags about the estimate that's in for that programme, that project.
Okay, do you want to ask another question on this, Councillor Ireland?
No, it was just to say thank you very much for answering that. I'm still a wee bit concerned because I know that inflation, it's projected to come down. Interest rates are going to go up over the next wee bit and probably won't be down to 2.5 by the end of December 25. But I noted in one of the Cabinet paper going tomorrow, it's saying that it's due to shortages of material and labour, and that I think there was some problem with the price of steel as well. So it's not expected that construction costs will come down as fast as maybe even if inflation comes down. I'm just a wee bit concerned. So it's either, is this £7 million going to keep increasing, or does the scope of the leisure centre decrease as time goes on?
So maybe Phil can come in on whether it was £7 million. I can't quite remember the figures because I think you're quoting from a previous paper in December. Is that right?
Yes, it was the option 2, which was the reduced option. And even on the reduced option, a 2-year delay is the 7 million and a 3-year delay is 8 million.
Yeah. So the 7 million was an estimate. Built in there at the moment, I think that was based on 52 million, which should give 3 million there. So the full 7 million hasn't been built in at the moment. But that's because there's work to be done to design, and at that point, but you're right, there is a risk it will go above the 55 million. Okay, but we'll come back nearer the time once things are a bit more certain.
Okay, thank you. Any other points, questions or comments? Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks, Provost. Just on page 479, outcome 1, the investment in Capelrig House. I know Councillor Bamforth raised this at IJB as well. Is this investment sufficient, or will we need to come back and look for additional funds to complete Capelrig House, or is there enough provision within the plan as is?
At the moment, there is not enough provision. Like everything else, that price was put in, and I think 2019, 2020, before COVID, and the project's been held up with COVID. We think it is likely we will have to come back. I'll maybe bring Katrina in a minute. We did meet with Children's First and had a very good meeting with them. What we do need to do is a bit more work just to confirm it is a listed building. The work is very important to keep that building in, or to improve the structure of the building, or to improve particularly some of the roof areas. So I think it will go significantly above that, and another report will have to come back based on that. The team didn't want, in terms of having the figure ready for this meeting, they felt they wanted to do a bit more work just to get the figure to a higher degree of accuracy before they come back. They didn't want to come back and ask for a bit more money and then maybe have to come back again. So you will get the chance to look at that once the figures are available. Katrina, no more updates from Katrina. We'll be working on that over the next few months.
Anybody else? That seems to be it. Okay, thank you very much. So can we approve the capital plan, including authority for officers to progress the 2023-24 projects? Agreed. Thank you. Moving on now to item 17, which is the Housing Revenue Account Rent Setting 2023-24. The report is looking for approval of the Housing Revenue Account budget for 2023-24 and the following: 5% rent increase to be applied from April 23, a 5% increase be applied to the sheltered housing warden charge, a 25% increase to be applied to communal heating and laundry charges, and up to $824,000 from Housing Revenue Account reserves be available to support the 2023-24 revenues, and a further report be brought to Cabinet following a review of the business plan. So I will invite Councillor Devlin to move the motion and the report recommendations. Councillor Devlin.
Thanks, Provost. Before agreeing any rent increase, the Council is required to have a budget that allows the Council to meet all relevant costs, which include staffing, property maintenance and debts. The budget must ensure the Council can meet all legal requirements on the service. In order to achieve the paper is seeking approval to the following recommendations: 5% increase from April 2023, 5% increase to be applied to the shelter warden charge, 25% increase to be applied to the communal heating and laundry charges. I will briefly address the proposals in turn. 5% increase to rents from April 2023. This is required to meet legislative standards such as the Scottish Housing Quality Standard and energy efficient in Scottish social housing. The budget faces a number of pressures, including 10% inflation and increased interest rates, utility costs and historic debt. The 5% increase will keep the rents affordable, as a full affordable assessment has been undertaken. East Lancashire Council remains the most affordable housing provider in the area. The 5% increase to be applied to the sheltered housing warden charge. The warden charge contributes towards the cost of employing 2 wardens for each complex. The current charge provides £54,000 of income, yet the cost to employ the wardens is over £400,000 each year. A 5% increase will provide an additional £2,700. The 25% increase to be applied to the communal heating and laundry charges. The sheltered complexes in Eastwood have communal heating systems. Residents pay this through a heating and laundry charge which provides £130,000 of income. With a significant increase in gas prices, the cost to heat these complexes is estimated to be £185,000 for 2023-24. Unfortunately, the Council does not qualify for any support from any government support schemes. The 25% increase will come to £166,000 for 2023-24. All of these factors place pressure on budgets over the next 3 years, and it's predicted to require input from reserves over the next 3 years. To ensure prudent management of the housing service, a further report will be brought to Cabinet following a range of business plans which will look at: can the repayment terms of our existing debts be reviewed? Can we charge how we use capital receipts? Are there any other areas of non-essential spend that can be reduced? I am happy to recommend this report to Council.
Thank you very much, Councillor Devlin. Before I go any further, is there any amendments to this? No. So we're agreeing the report. Agreed? Right, thank you very much. Moving on now to the item 18, which is the Housing Capital Programme 2023-24. And I'll invite Councillor Devlin to speak to this. Thank you very much, Councillor Devlin.
Start again. The paper sets out our capital programme for the next 10 years, which seeks approval to progress the key projects for 2023-24. There are key legislative areas that drive the development of our capital programme. The Scottish Housing Quality Standard, this was met in 2015, but we continued to invest to maintain this standard. Energy efficient and Scottish social housing, this was met in December 2020, but continued investment is needed to maintain it. The 10-year plan includes some significant investments in social housing, which I welcome. Over £32 million for new council houses, nearly £7.5 million in the new heating systems, nearly £16 million for external improvements such as new roofs. Nearly £1 million for internal improvements such as kitchens and bathrooms. Overall, for 2023-24, the total cost of the capital programme is £9 million, 6.6 for existing stock and 2.4 for new council housing. I am pleased to recommend this report to Council.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Devlin. Before I open it up to any questions or comments, are there any proposed amendments to this paper? I don't see any indicated. Oh, Councillor MacDonald, do you have an amendment, first of all, before I go to questions or comments? I just want to clarify, do you have an amendment?
I don't have an amendment, just to be clear. I just had a comment that I wanted to make.
Okay, well, if you could just hold that for a second, please, and we'll come back to you. So, given that there are no amendments, then this has been proposed, and I'll open it now up to questions or comments. Councillor Morrison had his hand up first, and then I'll come to you, Councillor MacDonald, second. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Provost. I have no objections to what Councillor Devlin has set out. I simply wanted to ask a question of clarity, which is on page 498. I'll allow people time to find that. The very last bullet point there, paragraph 15, a budget of £50,000 to fund house purchase opportunities. I really just wanted to question a bit more on that, because is that £50,000 per unit or £50,000 in total? Because £50,000 does not buy very much. I was just wondering what was intended for that fund. Thank you.
I understand Suzanne Conlon is available to answer questions on this. Thank you.
No, that's not £50,000 for the whole unit. That's a contribution, which is generally on a 50-50% split. So we get that money to purchase areas where we're not usually building. That's a contribution towards any sales that we... But it's not the full price.
Okay, having heard that, I'm quite happy with what the proposition is. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't have my microphone on there. Councillor MacDonald, you're next.
Yes, thank you, Provost. I just had a brief comment, and it's about actually, I had my hand up on the previous contribution by Councillor Devlin on the Housing Revenue Report, and that was, he had briefly mentioned that, I just wanted clarification as to why the council area does not qualify for any government support.
Suzanne, could you answer that as well, please, if that's all right?
My understanding is that because the contract for the utilities is with the council and therefore not residents, the government scheme only applies to residents, which the council doesn't qualify as.
Thank you.
Okay, does that answer your question, Councillor MacDonald? Yes? Okay then, thanks. Councillor Ireland.
Thank you very much, Provost. I do have a question on this paper. But I just wanted to double check with yourself and Mr Daly. I did have a couple of questions on the housing revenue account, but were we not permitted to ask questions on the housing revenue account? I do have a question on this, but I'm allowed, but I just wondered.
Sorry, Councillor, nobody indicated?
No,
not a person indicated
you went straight
at all.
to, if you don't have an amendment, then it's the paper's just passed.
Then it asked, is that agreed? But, so that was the opportunity for somebody to put their hand up and say, but I'll give you leeway whatever you want
very,
to say.
very good
There's no
question.
amendment, so you're not going to change the decision, so I will allow
Oh
you
no,
to.
it's not actually. There was no amendment. It just was, I was slightly concerned with the 25% increase to the heating charges for the sheltered housing. So I just wanted to ask the convener, is there a bit more information he can give me on what help is available to sheltered housing tenants to cover the increase of 25% on their fuel charges? And also just to confirm that the rent increase last year was 1% and the year before was 1%.
Councillor Devlin, would you like
but
to
I
answer
do have
that?
a question on this paper.
Well, we'll come back to that, Councillor Ireland, but anyway, we'll just deal with what we're at just now. Councillor Devlin, would you like to answer that, or would I refer it to Suzanne?
In regards to the 25% increase, I've not got the exact detail, but I'll pass you over to Suzanne, who will answer that.
Laundry. Any resident that has any problems paying and or any kind of debt, we would refer them to our colleagues in Mart and give them full support. There's lots of funding available to help people with cost of utilities. So if anyone had any concerns, we would support them fully in obtaining any additional funding.
Okay, now on to the current item on the agenda. Do you wish to speak on this, Councillor Ireland?
I do. Thank you, Suzanne. That kind of allays, because I was awful worried. It's page 500, paragraph 21. It's with regard to procurement. It states, the paper states, in conjunction with colleagues of procurement and property technical services, a robust approach is taken in relation to the procurement and management of external contractors. I suppose I've got my audit and scrutiny hat on slightly. I just wondered if the convener or Suzanne could point me towards where I can find additional information on the procurement approach and the methodology that's applied to the contracts.
Maybe the easiest way, if you wanted to meet with our head of procurement, because I'm not exactly sure what you'd be looking for. They've got formal procurement procedures that align with, it's a very legal thing, procurement. So there's lots of legislation around it which we comply with, and then the specific best practice that relates to construction. So perhaps you want to meet with the housing team and perhaps one of the procurement team who specialise in that area.
That would be hugely helpful. It's just because there wasn't much information given. That would be hugely helpful. Thank you.
Okay, can we agree the Housing Capital Programme? Agreed? Right, thank you very much. Now moving on to item 19, the post of Chief Executive. So, key matters for approval are the recruitment process, the job description, person specification, the membership of the Appointments Committee, and the authority for the committee to put in place interim management arrangements if required. Now we have Sharon Dick, who's Head of Service. Yeah, she is. So if anybody has any questions on this paper, if you would like to indicate so that I can actually see you and come to you for a question. Councillor MacDonald? Is that you want to speak? All right, on you go.
I just wanted to ask Mrs. if what means are utilised in this situation. It doesn't come around very often, but what means are utilised in terms of putting out a national search for recruitment for replacement for a chief executive for a council?
Okay, the Head of Service, Sharon Dick, can respond to that one. Sharon, thanks.
Hi, Councillor MacDonald. We're working with Aspen People Limited, as mentioned in the paper, and also we'll advertise in My Job Scotland. It goes in S1 Jobs, but also Aspen have got contacts, so that we will talk with the Appointments Committee about what approach they wish to take with the advertising. But the job will go through My Job Scotland, so it'll be in S1 Jobs and Total Jobs as well as a result of that.
Anything else, Councillor MacDonald?
Is there anything that goes a little bit further afield into the entire UK? I mean, obviously My Job Scotland is a resource that is predominantly accessed by people within Scotland, but is there anything that we utilise beyond the Scottish border to look throughout the UK?
It will be promoted through Aspen's website as well, so people who are looking to come to a chief executive position within Scotland will, they're one of the agencies that are used, so they will use their own networks. But equally, if the council decide, the Appointments Committee decide they want to promote it further, that's something that could be discussed as well.
Okay, thanks, Sharon. Councillor MacDonald, finished? All right, thank you very much. So can we agree what's outlined in the recruitment process? Agreed? Agreed. Right, thank you very much. Now on to item 20, which is workforce management. And this report seeks council approval on the level of discretionary enhanced compensatory payments made to employees who leave the organisation via means of redundancy or an early retirement efficiency. The proposal is to reduce the discretionary enhanced compensatory package, setting the compensatory lump sum at up to 52 weeks and the number of added years up to 2 added years. These changes would take effect with implementation of the budget savings for 2023-24 and apply thereafter. I'll open it up for any questions or comments and I will ask Sharon to respond. Are there any questions, comments, points? I don't see any indicated. Are you deliberating whether you're going to... Councillor Buchanan.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. It's just to say that having looked at the tables within this, and I know it's been up for discussion previously and we took the decision not to amend it, but I certainly understand the pressures that are on the Council in relation to that, and that we are, to some extent, a bit of an outlier in terms of updating that. So I would propose that rather than go to the 52 weeks, that we settle on 66 weeks, which is probably where the majority of councils in the 18 that were tested are lying at. So my proposal would be to amend the 52 to 66 weeks.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have a motion and we have an amendment.
We don't have the motion moved and second. We need to get somebody to move.
Okay.
Second the proposal. In the
okay, I just was going to look at the report and see whose name was attached to it. Okay, so we have the... So you're going to propose it, Councillor O'Donnell? I know, I'm just going to check whose name, what councillor, or the convener, whose name. So it's you, Councillor O'Donnell?
Yeah, I think, Tori, you got your...
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. So, first of all, you're going to propose the motion.
Yep.
Who's going to second the motion? This motion about workforce management paper, it's item 20. Councillor Anderson has seconded it. Councillor Buchanan, you have an amendment, and who's going to second it? Both of you? Okay, one of you? Councillor Ireland, okay. So we'll go to the motion, first of all. Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you. I support the paper. In reflection, when we look at the costs of the voluntary redundancy package compared to the rest of Scotland, we currently are the most generous in all of the councils in Scotland. I think going to the 52 weeks brings us more in line, which I think will end up being the average after all the councils have made their adjustments as well. The key driver, as Councillor Buchanan has said, is costs really, and obviously when we talked about the 35 million, over 30 million cuts over 3 years, that excludes redundancy costs, so this is additional costs over and beyond the numbers we talked about earlier in the budget process. So I think 52 weeks is a fair offer for voluntary redundancy. I think if we looked to the public, I think they would be surprised that we were at 76 or 78 weeks. And I believe that they would be looking for a limit of 52 weeks at this stage. So I propose the motion.
Thank you very much. Councillor Anderson, would you like to speak to or formally second the motion? Would you like to speak to it or not?
Formally second it, but
okay.
I'd like just to echo the comment there about the perception externally, you know, with considering everything we've discussed today and the challenges that the council is facing. And we have obviously looked at this paper and discussed it, and I think that the people of East Renfrewshire would be happy that at this level, as opposed to where it was set, which is what Councillor Donald has just said.
Councillor Buchanan, would you like to speak to your amendment?
Yeah, thanks, Provost. Again, for much of the things outlined, and as I've touched on earlier, it is a significant decrease in what we are currently doing, and I think we all acknowledge that that was at the top end of the scale. But I do believe that moving it to the 66 weeks would be acceptable, not only for us, but I think that also sends a message to our staff as well in relation to it, because no one, voluntary or otherwise, there are pressures on staff, and so I would suggest that we go to the 66 weeks.
Councillor Buchanan, Councillor Ireland, you were seconded. Do you want to speak to it, or just formally second from where you are?
Thank you very much. Provost, I do agree with what Councillor Buchanan said, that the paper's right in that it requires to be reduced. We are, again, at that top end, but we also have a requirement to support our staff as well. And given what we just watched with the budget revenue paper, and the concern I have over the people's jobs and the cuts that were passed, I think this amendment's particularly important, and I'm surprised to find that standing by the paper, because the reason why I wanted to second this was I read on page 521 that there was consultation work done, and it states the trade unions have been made aware of the proposed changes to the discretionary enhanced compensatory payments. They are not supportive of these changes and express concern at the benchmarking responses, in that we only went out to 18 local authorities and listed that information there. They wanted a more thorough piece of work done. The trade unions also disagreed with the proposal, as this would mean the enhancements offered were worse than the average of other councils. They requested better alignment with other councils, and they did offer up 66 weeks for the discretionary enhanced payment, and they were happy at that amount. And for that reason, I'm fully supportive of the 66 weeks, because that is what the unions want, and I'm very surprised to find Labour in the Chamber not supporting that. Thank you.
Sharon, would you like to comment on the issues raised there, for example, benchmarking, the other aspects? Thanks.
Yeah, just to clarify, the benchmarking request was sent out to all 32 councils. Only 18 responded for the most recent, and we also included the 2018 date, some of the data we had from there, which 25 councils responded to at that point, so that was included in the report as well.
So are there any other contributions to this discussion?
Councillor Wallace.
Oh, Councillor Wallace, thank you very much, and please indicate so that I can see you and bring you in next to anybody else who's in the chamber. Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Provost. I'd be hugely disappointed if the unions were not against this idea. That's what they're there for. That's why I'm a union member myself. But I think the reality has been spelt out as to where we are with budgets, etc. And I don't wish to, again, have another pop at SNP, but they are forever able to spend other people's money very freely. I think the approach that's been taken there has been very fair to our employees. We could have gone under the 52-week mark, and I think when we compare ourselves with the private sector, it remains very generous, and I think we are looking after our funds, but also looking after our staff at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to? Councillor Morrison.
Very briefly, Provost, I'm referencing a conversation which took part in the Audit and Scrutiny Committee deliberations on the garden waste permit, for example. It had actually been remarked by Councillor Ireland that we were measuring ourselves in terms of a moving target, and that other authorities may indeed have been increasing that charge. Well, I would apply the same logic to this situation here, and that the benchmarking for 2022 is 2022. This is 2023, and like the other 31 local authorities in Scotland, we're trying to balance a budget. We're up against increased financial pressures, and I would say that the reference to this benchmarking report would potentially already be out of date and the other local authorities in setting their budgets will also be looking to reduce the compensation payment, just as we are deliberating today. So I would just urge members to consider that. Thank you.
Very much, Mr Morrison. Councillor Morrison. If there are no other comments or questions, I'm going to ask Eamon to conduct the... Oh, sorry, Eamon. Sorry, Councillor O'Donnell. Yes, you're summing up.
I think it's good to see that there's consensus that there's significant cost pressures for our budgets for the next 3 years, and that the current schemes are certainly on the generous side when looked externally. Getting the right balance that is fair to our trade union colleagues and all workers that would be affected by this is important, but also we have to be mindful of the budget constraints and affordability of the schemes as they were arranged. I think this is a fair balance. I do think the benchmarking is important to keep that up to date so that we do know where we are in this sort of measure over time. Note the data is a bit out of date and likely to move, but I think if ever we're considering this again, that we should keep in mind what other councils are doing as well. But I think this is a fair compromise of still offering a generous voluntary package to our staff, with balance with the cost to the council and the impact on other of our vital services. So I would recommend the motion to council.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Now hand over to Eamon to conduct the voting as is normal.
Thank you, Provost. The motion before the Council, proposed by Councillor O'Donnell and seconded by Councillor Anderson, is as set out in the papers. The amendment by Councillor Buchanan, seconded by Councillor Ireland, is broadly similar with the exception of the 52-week limit being changed to 66 weeks. If I can go through again in alphabetical order, asking you to indicate whether or not you're for the motion, the amendment, or if you would like to abstain. So, Councillor Anderson.
Motion.
Councillor Bamforth.
Amendment.
Councillor Buchanan.
Amendment.
Councillor Campbell.
Motion.
Councillor Convery.
Amendment.
Councillor Cunningham.
Motion.
Councillor Devlin.
Motion.
Councillor Edlin.
Motion.
Councillor Ireland.
Amendment.
Councillor Lundy.
Amendment.
Councillor MacDonald.
Amendment.
Councillor McLean.
Motion.
Councillor Merrick.
Amendment.
Provost Montague.
Motion.
Councillor Morrison.
Motion.
Councillor O'Donnell.
Motion.
Councillor Pragnell.
Motion.
Councillor Wallace.
Motion.
Thank you, Provost. The result of the vote is 11 for the motion, 7 for the amendment. The motion is declared carried.
Thank you, Eamon. Moving now to item 21, which is a scheme for members' remuneration and expenses 2023-24. So this is the annual report seeking approval of the 20. Is there a problem, councillors? Excuse me, is there a problem? No? All right, thank you. So, seeking approval of the 2023-24 scheme following the making of the regulations increasing members' salaries from 1st of April. So, are there any questions or points on this, or can we agree the report? I'll open it up. Councillor Bamforth.
Can I just question, The remuneration, it was agreed at a previous council meeting. I'm not sure if it comes within the 6-month rule for the Vice Chair of Planning. Now, the rationale at the time by Councillor O'Donnell was to reflect the amount of work required as Vice Chair of Planning. However, subsequent to that, the number of planning committee meetings has been halved. So can I ask how we can still justify, if the rationale was the amount of work involved and we have now reduced it by 50%, how can we still justify that remuneration?
Councillor Bamford, as you well know, a remuneration is awarded for the responsibility payment, and it's not based on the number of meetings. But if Eamon would like to add to that.
There's nothing really much further for me to say, Provost. I think you've made the point that it's a responsibility payment. As you know, there are payments there for other councillors, Councillor Bamford, and the level of duties that each of those conveners receive will not be exactly the same. So it's not about the volume, it's about the overall responsibility, and that's the basis in which the positions have been reflected.
Okay, can we agree the report? Agreed? Agreed. Okay, thank you very much. And that brings us to... Oh, sorry, Councillor MacDonald, I didn't notice. Sorry, on you go.
I just want to ask a question why the Vice Chair of Audit and the Vice Chair of Licensing do not receive an SRA, whereas the Vice Chair of Planning does? Thanks.
I think, Councillor MacDonald, that's a decision that's already been made and is in public domain. So, is there any other...
No, I was just wondering why the reasoning for it, why there's a Vice Chair and the Chair of one committee receiving an SRA when the other two committees, licensing and audit, that doesn't happen. It just seems an anomaly. The public would like to know.
Okay.
This was addressed at the May meeting when the committee structures were agreed.
I don't think the reasoning behind it was made clear, because as far as I'm led to believe, only one person can sit in the chair at one time.
Okay. Councillor MacDonald, the decision has been made, so we're not in the immediate process of changing that. There's a scheme in front of us today, and that's what we are discussing, is the actual scheme, not the process of allocating people to positions. So, Councillor Ireland, then Councillor Devlin? No. Is that right? No, Councillor Ireland.
Thank you very much. It's just a wee quick question, but I would confirm as a member of the Planning Committee that yes, the meetings have been cut in half. So that's a confirmed. That happened right after you agreed to pay the extra money to the Conservative. My question is a very quick one, and Eamon, it's just when will the expenses be produced? When can we expect to see members' expenses? But when does that come out?
Barbara Clark can answer this question, but can I also say, Councillor Ireland, that if anybody wishes to put forward a motion opposing any of this, feel free to do so.
No, I'm just curious when the expenses are out.
Barbara, sorry, the question was in relation to when the members' allowances for next year will be published. Normally, you would deal with that.
It's part of the annual accounts, and that will be it'll be in the website at the end of May, but it's also included as part of the annual accounts.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. So we are agreeing the scheme of members' remuneration and expenses 2023-24, and can I thank you all for your attendance and for all the work that's going in to this by everybody involved, especially all the council officers. So thank you very much.